Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Madi Kay, this is my big chair, and today we are once again diving into Onyx Storm, the third installment of the Fourth Wing Imperium series. We began this deep dive journey a couple of weeks ago with my very first episode, so if you have not seen that, I would invite you to watch that one first and then come back once you have finished. So my last video, we actually covered the chapters 1 through 12, which was all the way up until page 112, and today we'll be continuing on to the next 12 chapters of the story, and those are chapters 13 through 24. And before we get started, I would like to go over a brief recap to refresh our memories of what we talked about in my previous episode. Now, the main antagonists of the series, the Venin, they are attacking the citizens of the continent with a vengeance. They are starving towns of all of their magic and power by wielding from the earth and therefore poisoning it, making those regions unlivable. But Violet, our main character, really only has two thoughts on her mind.
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
You want to have sex?
That's pretty much it. Oh, and the cure for the Venin. Because Violet only thinks with her libido, she's concerned that Xaden is now turning full Venin. He wielded an iron flame, and throughout the rest of the book, he will be struggling with his new Venin identity. And he is starting to pull away from Violet, knowing that they will no longer be able to be together once he goes full Venin. So throughout the first 100 pages, Xaden has basically been blocking his own girlfriend out of his head. And Tyrion is not on Team Xaden, disregarding the fact that Xaden is actually his mate's writer, and if he dies, then his mate will be very upset. But who cares about logic and reason in the world of Onyx Storm? Certainly not the Human Council, also known as the Serenium, who are currently deliberating on the peace treaty between the Navarians and the Paroman. And they are moving at a snail pace so slow that Frodo and Samwise actually stop to tell them to hurry up. The Serenium, which is full of Violet's mortal enemies, are on their heels and refusing to move forward with the very task force that is assigned to go find Andarna's people and the cure for the Venin. They are on a ticking time clock, and really they cannot afford to waste any more time, resources, or soldiers if they keep pushing back against Violet, so they decide to come up with a compromise. They have quite a few stipulations for Violet and her task force. Number 1, she will not be in charge. Captain Grady will. Number 2, Violet's ex has been assigned to the task force in order to represent the royal family of Navarre. Rebecca Yarros is keen on forcing another love triangle into the already convoluted series chock full of these fake love triangles. It's honestly laughable to me that anyone would even consider Dane and Kat to be any kind of competition for these two, especially since it's already been explicitly established in the books that these two are endgame and no one's going to come in between them. This is just drama for drama's sake. So Violet and her friends break the rules in order to raise the wards and give the Griffin Flyers back their ability to access their lesser magic powers. The Venin also attack Abesgaith War College in search of Jack, who is currently locked up in prison. The Griffin Flyers and Dragon Riders continue to butt heads over their prejudice towards each other, cemented over centuries of fighting and generations of needless war and bloodshed. Tyrion also takes a huge fall out of the sky and crashes to the ground, almost killing himself and injuring Violet in the process. Then Violet and her friends are taken to the front as punishment by General Atos, and there they break the rules once again to go rescue the villagers who are being attacked by Venin, only to find out that it was a trap. But don't worry, Theophany was just there to taunt Violet and then disappears into thin air. And what was she taunting Violet about? The Queen is hell-bent on collecting Violet and Xaden like precious artifacts and using them as weapons in the war. She is convinced that not only will Xaden turn to the dark side, but she will also be able to persuade Violet to follow in his footsteps. You can't fault her for being a little too optimistic. Violet also takes it upon herself to do more research on the Venin and interrogates Jack in a scene that is very reminiscent of Clarice and Hannibal in The Silence of the Lambs. Although I don't think that Venin like liver or candy for that matter, which also brings me to my next point. What do the Venin eat? Do they drink? Are they cannibals? I have so many questions, and of course those will never be answered. It is revealed through Garrick that you can have more than one signet power, and that the Venin also have signets. For example, the Venin Sage actually has the ability to control the weather, basically like Storm, and also Violet's mother. Coincidence? I think not. Violet and Xaden also have to navigate their brand new relationship, and they draw up new boundaries that they cannot be physically intimate with each other. Despite the fact that they are still sleeping in the same bed, Violet also takes it upon herself to stick her nose in other people's business and to put herself and other people at risk in order to save the day. And this is mostly because she is the poster child for main character syndrome. Everything that Violet does is right, and she cannot be questioned, and if you dare to question her or try to antagonize her in any way, shape, or form, you will be killed. She has her boyfriend, who is also the heir to the Navarian throne, to have her back, as well as her entire Scooby gang of friends who defend her even when she is in the wrong. These people are way more of a hype or cheerleading squad for Violet than complex characters with their own stories. And that's the recap. Thankfully, within the next 100 pages, things actually do get more interesting. I still have a lot of questions about the way that her world works. And unfortunately, the more I read, the more confused I become, and none of my questions are really answered. One question that I have is, where is Violet's mother's dragon? Her mother passed away, and her dragon is just out there in the open flying around. Also, it is revealed in the first 100 pages of this book that other countries do have hatching grounds for dragons, which makes me wonder, why is it that the Navarians have monopoly on dragon riders? Next question that I have is, why were the Navarians and the Bromish even fighting each other in the first place? We still don't have that reason, and this is book number 3. Also, how is it that no one has been able to recognize the Prince of Navarre? You're telling me that this man has been able to masquerade around cosplaying as a peasant for months, and everyone is none the wiser. Also, why aren't the dragons in charge? Why are they even listening to humans if they don't even acknowledge their gods or their roles? Why is Nia the one translating these texts and not Violet? It doesn't make any sense why she's not interpreting her own journals. It would not be the first time that Violet has taken advantage of her friends for her own personal gain. Also, why is it that the Navarian government is not being held accountable for the fact that they've lied to their citizens for years about the venom? No one really seems to call their authority into question, and they just go about their business as if nothing has happened, like these people have never censored or threatened or killed people because they were too close to revealing the secret. Personally, I would not listen to a single word that these people say, especially when it comes to matters of war. The next question that I have is, how old can dragons be, and why do none of them seem to know what the venom are? If they're supposed to be these ancient beings who live for centuries, why is it only that Indarna's people know the secrets to fighting the venom and no other dragons, despite the fact that many of them are centuries old? It doesn't seem plausible to me that these incredibly intelligent creatures do not know the venom's weakness or how to kill them in battle. Another question that I have is, why don't Violet and her friends just leave while this Uranium Council is looking the other way and go find the cure on their own? It would also make more sense in the grand scheme of things based off the character motivation. Another question I have is, why are Intrinsics considered a threat despite the fact that humans and their bonded dragons have a telepathic bond between them where they can read each other's minds? Not to mention we have Zayden and Dane and Imogen who get to have a pass despite the fact that their powers are directly related to the Intrinsic, and they are not killed off? Why is that? Also, another question I have that seems like a rudimentary thing, but do dragons actually sleep? What do they do when the humans are going night-night? Where do they sleep? Where do they go? Is there like a cave? Also, to General Atos, Grin, and Varish, and Jack Barlow, is why do these dragons bond to bad people, and why don't they sever ties with them if they know that they are doing harm to dragons? Last question, why don't the other riders have saddles and the dragon scale armor? It seems very selfish that Violet would hoard this excessive wealth of technology for herself and her own protection without even thinking of extending it to her friends who risk their lives every day by flying on their dragons. Why wouldn't she want to make their job safer? Why wouldn't she want them to be more efficient fighters? It doesn't really bode well or reflect well on Violet's character, showing her lack of generosity with her friends and self-centered nature. Personally, I feel like this book would be much better if it was written through Imogen or Rhiannon's point of view, but that's just me. So before we dive into the video as a whole, I do want to harken back to some things that I got wrong in my last video that you guys were nice enough to point out to me. If you notice that I make any mistakes or I miss something or I mispronounce anything, please let me know. So one of those mistakes that I made was when I made a joke about the fact that Violet is wearing a corset under her armor, and I thought it was ridiculous that she would be forced to make this fashion statement while she was fighting in battle. And someone did remind me that this was established in Fourth Wing because Mira actually made an armor for Violet that was made out of dragon scales. I totally forgot about that detail. Thank you for pointing it out and correcting me. Some people have mentioned that I've been mispronouncing some of the names in the books, and I apologize for that. I'm going based off of what the audiobook narrators said. read. So phonetically, I'm depending on the narrators to make those distinctions for me. I don't want to displace any blame onto these people. They're doing their best, but I assume that they do the necessary research to pronounce these words correctly. My next and thankfully last mistake, I was questioning why there was thunder when Violet was doing her lightning thing, and that is because lightning actually does create thunder because it heats up the air and it creates that deafening booming sound. Thank you so much for bringing those issues to my attention. I will try to do better going forward, and this is also a brief warning that there will be spoilers ahead, and also a reminder there will be trigger warnings for injuries involving EDS, sexual situations, talk of family loss and grief, as well as gore and violence, and anything involving war. Basically the same trigger warning as the last video, and make sure to leave a like down below, subscribe so you can get notifications on my upcoming videos, and to start a brand new tradition on this channel, I'm going to be opening up each video with a question that you guys can respond to down in the comments. So your question for this video is a game that I like to call Ride, Marry, Kill. So who in these books would you ride, marry, or kill? I'll go first. So I would actually marry Eric, the prince. I would kill his brother Halden, who is a crown prince of Navarre. So that way Eric is now the crown prince of Navarre, and he will eventually take over his father's throne. I will become queen of Navarre, and it'll just be perfect. A match made in heaven. I would also ride Andarna because she is my favorite dragon. Actually, I think my favorite character of the whole series. Alright, let me know what your answers are down below. Who would you ride, marry, kill in the Fourth Wing universe? And this could be anyone alive or dead. Alright, and without further ado, let's get into it. And also for context, I will be using my Onyx Storm bingo card, so if you want one of these for yourself, make sure to check out the link for it down below. I think I did make it shareable this time. Please let me know if you cannot access it. I'm not the best at technology. It's a miracle that I even get these videos up on YouTube to begin with. And I will also be using scratch and sniff smelly stickers in order to fill in the tiny little squares that you see here. So I think that'll make it even more fun because I am apparently a child. Let's get started. Last video we left off on chapter 13, and this one probably has the funniest passage of the whole story because it's basically Nia telling us that she failed something. How is this relevant to the story? That's why Violet should be the one translating it, because I feel like we're reading Nia's LinkedIn profile when she went from this job to this job. Upon failure of 3 exams, Nia Neilwart has been removed from the adept path and stripped of all of its responsibilities and sacred privileges as of January 15th. Under protest, I transfer her command to Professor Grady at his over-authoritative request. That reminds me, we can check off the excerpt at the beginning of the chapter as pointless. Bingo square. Perfect. Oh yeah, it smells really good. We're not even 1 minute into this book and we're already off to a very bad start. So in the previous chapter, chapter 12, Violet is interrogating Jack Barlow and asking him questions about the Venom. So for the first time ever, she's making an intelligent move to find out more about their enemies. And Jack really doesn't relinquish a lot of this information very easily, and she came to an unsettling revelation. So he, referring to Jack, said we could be surrounded by Venom and never know it, which is terrifying to think of, and also should be a pretty big kick in the pants. Just get the task force together and leave because they're gonna die by venom anyway. Why not be productive in the war effort while you're at it? And I guess we can also add Jack as being a jackass to bingo card, because even though he's being helpful, he's just nickel and diming them for information just for the fun of it. And this is also another issue that I have with this book, is they spent so much time trying to put up these wards. Like General Soren literally lost her life so that they could protect Basgiath War College, but the Venom can still attack whenever they want and they would never know it. I'm sorry, but that makes the wards look so superfluous. They have no point whatsoever. They're supposed to protect people and shield them from magic, but the Venom can still override that protective shield and still get into the college anyway. Why aren't they doing that now? Why aren't they just continuously attacking these people and making their lives more difficult? And it also seems wildly inefficient because now they're also losing people when they could just teleport into the enemy's castle and tear them apart from the inside out. I'm not exactly sure why they're not doing that. The Venom are just as inept at war as Navarrians are. So after this discussion, they go back to the infirmary to talk to Sawyer, who is trying to get a prosthetic leg, but he doesn't like the wooden one that the college is trying to give to him, so now he has to come up with his own design. Again, I'm not sure why Violet is not volunteering to help him. I don't know why she didn't suggest that they make him a saddle. Violet, who's supposed to be the goodest good girl of all time, is not actively trying to help her friends, people that she claims to care about. Your disability is not yourself! She never really shows us how much she cares. They're basically pawns in this game between her and Xaden. And then of course, because this is an adult book, they talk about their sex lives, they make fun of each other for sleeping with other people at the war college. Riddick apparently has been flirting with someone. After reading this line, I wish I could have bleached my eyes. Riddick bedhops like a fucking frog. Why did I need to know that information? Just to clarify, I'm not critiquing the casual hookup culture that they have at Best Guy War College, because casual dating is healthy fun as long as you're being responsible. After listening to one too many of his jokes, it's hard to imagine that this guy is a Casanova when he has such a terrible personality. And then Rhiannon talks about a girl named Tara who we're just now learning about because Violet cares only about her own love life and not her friends. She never asks questions about their personal life, they just tell her about it. This information is spoon-fed to her in the most unnatural ways possible. So Rhi is seeing this girl named Tara casually, and it's not because she doesn't want to commit to her, it's just because of their schedules. Leadership is hard on both our schedules. We're together when we have time, but it's not like we're seeing other people. So they're exclusive, but they're not really that serious. And then she actually talks about Violet's relationship with Xaden and makes a dig at their dynamic. You and Ryerson bicker like you've been married 50 years and neither of you wants to do the dishes. Once again, comparing them to an old married couple because they fight all the time, which is not a very good sign. It sounds incredibly unhealthy if the only thing that's keeping you guys together is drama. And after my personal dating experience, I'll take the boring over the dramatic any day of the week. The constant conflict is not worth it. Little PSA from your friendly neighborhood book vlogger here. It's very enlightening about the true nature of our love interests, the people that we're supposed to be rooting for, the fact that even other characters notice that these two can't stop fighting. Bit of a red flag there if you ask me. And then Sawyer says something very interesting, and this goes completely against everything that we know about the scenario and the best guy of people, because he actually says that a lot of people, higher ranking people in authority of power, are actually also rooting for Violet and Xaden for some reason. I bet leadership secretly loves that you're with Ryerson. Why would they like that? They hate both Violet and Xaden. Why would they be rooting for them to be together? Makes absolutely no sense. Legacies usually make for stronger writers, and as much power as you two wield, Melgren will probably escort you both to a temple of your choosing the second you're commissioned. So if they want them to be together, why would they let Atos make Xaden a teacher so they can't date? Rebecca Yarros is trying to create this narrative that does not exist in her own book. Rebecca, are you even reading your own books? You should know that this is not true. This book should have gone through 10 more rounds of edits, and it should have at least 2 beta readers per book because there are so many issues, not just in the dialogue. The story overall doesn't make sense.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
This is very contradictory to what we have been seeing in the book. If they want these two to be together, why would they force them to separate in Iron Flame? Why would they force Xaden to be a teacher? It doesn't add up. The math just isn't mathing. And Sawyer is either incredibly stupid or incredibly naive to the fact that these people do not like Violet and Xaden, and they are making their lives a personal hell. Again, I don't know how many more obvious these people can make it that they are not fans of Violet and Xaden. And they continue to talk about Melgren in a way that also does not check out with the character that we have seen throughout the series. So this is Rhiannon talking. Maybe one day, she muses. Just saying that you're lucky Melgren hasn't yanked you out of Battle Brief and personally seen to the arrangements and hope that your kid will be the next one in the Battle Foresight in 21 years. So Rhiannon is alluding to the fact that because these two are very powerful, I guess that means that their children will also be powerful. So these people in power should be really pushing Xaden and Violet together to get married and procreate and have babies that will be even stronger, if not just as strong as they are. Riddick says something that is completely out of left field and makes no sense with Melgren's character. He, talking about Melgren, is so short-sighted. You mean the guy that can see the future is being short-sighted? It's just a very funny thing to say about a literal psychic. The whole character of Melgren makes absolutely no sense because he should be acting in a very different way than he is right now. And then Anya enters the infirmary and starts signing to Sawyer because they have this flirtation, infatuation thing going on. I don't know if they're official quite yet, but they're really cute together. I would actually like to see them as a couple. Unfortunately for us, Yarros wants to focus more on Xaden and Violet, so these two characters get shoved into the background. But I do see moments with them together because they're very cute. And I think it's really nice of Sawyer to step up and try to communicate with Jesenia, because I think that's a mark of a very good partner. Jesenia is there because she is Violet's little errand girl, because all of Violet's friends have basically 3 functions: slave, cheerleader, or scapegoat. And it's also revealed here that Jesenia can actually read lips. So does that mean that people don't have to sign to her? Does that mean that she can still understand them? What are the limitations of her reading lips? Does she just get a basic gist of what people are saying? Is that something that she can use to help her spy on people? Because everyone knows that she is deaf, so why not send her in to these important meetings and have her eavesdrop through reading lips of their enemies? Just seems like a bit of a missed opportunity there. Especially coming from a character that's supposed to be clever, Violet is showing again and again that she is incapable of making any logical or good decision without help. And even when she does come up with a good solution, it always involves getting her friends in trouble. Being friends with Violet is way deadlier than I think Yaros likes to admit. Her friends are very low on the totem pole of things that Violet cares about, and they're not a priority in her life, and it shows with how often she's willing to put them in harm's way. So Jesenia reports back to Violet and tells her that she's actually been reassigned to be a scribe under Captain Grady, once again sacrificing not only her life but her livelihood for Violet, who does nothing to help her but give her some sympathy. And she is withholding information from Riddick and Sawyer, despite the fact that Violet is going to tell them everything anyway, so I don't know why Nia is being stringent when it comes to who she's telling this information to. We all know that Violet cannot keep a secret to save her life, so she might as well just share with the rest of the class because they're gonna learn anyway. So Nia says, I've been given the one assignment with which they know I can be trusted, helping you with research. She willingly did Violet's dark bidding, and she's the one who got in trouble, not Violet, solidifying herself as a scapegoat. And Violet will not stick her neck out for her friends enough to actually get them out of situations that she put them in, but she's willing to stick out her neck for Zayden. Violet Sorrengail is a terrible friend, and it's so shocking to me that these people can stand her / like her at all, especially knowing that she is willing to put them in harm's way for her own personal gain. And what's even worse is that Violet is the only one who's allowed to complain about anything. Even though she got relocated, she plays it off like it's no big deal, and she's actually fine with it.
It's totally fine. I don't know why it's coming out all loud and squeaky, because really, I'm fine.
I'm left on my own with a treasure trove of royal tomes no one has read in at least the last 400 years. Look at me suffering. Why has no one read these tomes in 400 years? So many questions and not enough answers. But then Anya finally proves her worth when she reveals that she actually found a book or tome that has some information about the Irids, or Indarna's people, the one key in stopping the war against the Venom. It was recorded that when the last Irid hatches and bonds, the cadet born of writer and scribe, she'll be gifted with 2 signets. So this is a prophecy alluding to Violet because she is a writer, born of writer and scribe. So the scribe being her father and the writer being her mother, and she is also bonded with an Irid. We've learned in Iron Flame that Andarna hatched because of Violet, and that ties even more strongly into the prophecy. So Riddick gets very excited about this revelation because he thinks that Violet now is the key to stopping the Venom, and he turns to her and he says there's a prophecy, and he's cut off when Violet shakes her head, saying that the prophecy isn't about her. But how would she know that? Violet is suddenly an expert about prophecies? How is that possible? And then Riddick turns to Ginny, you really are kidding, aren't you? There's no prophecy? And then Ginny says, of course there's no prophecy. Then why did you say anything? Why did you intentionally mislead us as the reader? Because guess what happens hundreds of pages later? It's revealed that there actually is a prophecy, and it is about Violet. So why would you try to lead us down a different path as a reader if you know that this is true? Why would you lie to us? Why is she acting like this is false information? Why deflect away from a prophecy? A prophecy is a great way for fantasy stories to not only cement certain lore, but it's also a good way to explain away a lot of things, like why certain characters are chosen, why certain things happen. Oh, it was a prophecy. It's written in stone, it's part of the future, like dramatic irony, because we as the reader know that these things are going to happen, and now we're watching to see how it plays out. It's really fun. It's like a mystery we're trying to solve as we're going through the story, and I don't know why you wouldn't implement that in your story. It's a perfect tool in fantasy, and it makes no sense why you would not take advantage of that. And then Dinya gets mad at Riddick for some reason. I know why I'm upset at Riddick, because he's an annoying character, but all these people just get angry at each other for absolutely no reason, and she was mad at him, and she says, this information isn't for you, but you're signing it. Everyone in this room can understand sign language, and you are giving Violet information through sign language, and then you're upset when people interject in the conversation. Jasenia, go to a private room with Violet, tell her what you know, and then have her relay this information to her friends when she deems it appropriate. All these characters are such idiots, I'm telling you. And the worst part is that Anya actually confirms that there is no prophecy, despite the fact that she found the information, interpreted it in a way that was very obviously Violet, and then she rescinds the information, pretends like it's wrong. So is she just really bad at her job, or is she just trying to mislead the other characters? The only reason why she would want to withhold this information or pretend there's no prophecy is if it's prophesied that Violet might die in battle, because that's written in stone. There's no way that you can go around that, but it's a very specific prophecy, very obviously leading to Violet, but she never really delves into the details of what the prophecy foretells. What's going to happen? Are the Venom going to be defeated? Are they going to win? Is she going to rise to power? Is she going to become the queen of Perumish? What's happening there? It's not a real prophecy, right? But we learn later that it is. So this entire conversation is a complete waste of time. So Anya actually gives Violet some reading material to do more research. Now I gathered these 6 for you to read, which mostly cover the southernmost isle. Figure that's where you might start, but I'll warn you that Grady has requested tomes about the Emerald Sea exploration in the north. So Captain Grady and the Human Council want to go north, and Violet and Darna and her friends want to go in the opposite direction, south. You can't just have a task force that goes in 2 separate directions, so they're going to have to go north with Grady, even though they know that it's in the wrong direction. And they're going to need way more information, not only on Devreli, but also on the Irid, and Violet knows the exact scribe who has this kind of information at his fingertips. It's not Markham, it's her father. And he apparently had a journal that is in her mother's office, which is now General Atos' office, so she does not have access to that tome. Violet relays this information to her friends. My father, in all his research, the work that he had yet to publish is now really hard to access. And Violet says that in order to access it, we need Dane to betray his father. So Dane has to basically sneak into his father's office and steal the tome for Violet and then give it to her, which I don't know why she thinks that he wouldn't do it. Dane has been very much on Team Violet this entire time, and now that Atos has basically disowned him, he has even more of a motivation to betray his father. That was the impetus. That was the inciting incident that changed Dane as a character. So I feel like Dane is growing in a positive way, and I don't understand why Violet does not think that he would want to help them. I think that she thinks that Dane is way more loyal to his father and to Bethsgaiath than he really is. But thankfully for her, the disillusionment is really starting to settle in, and Dane is actually going to help them. Violet is considering how she's going to break the news to Dane, and during Battle Brief, they're looking at a map of the Venom territory versus their territory, and they're seeing the progress that the Venom are making, and it's very clear that the Venom are actually winning this war. They do not have a lot of time to defeat them before they take over everything. The damning color spans from the Barrens up to the Stonewater River, before spreading along the ward line, like the enemy is searching for weaknesses. The wards are keeping them out, even though they can still teleport beyond the wards, but I guess not all of them can make it beyond the wards. Again, the wards are still very confusing. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. They're very unpredictable. But thankfully, Samara still stands. Zayden's safe, at least for now. He's been gone more than 10 days, and Tyrion is at his wit's end. So the longer they stay apart, the more painful it is, not only for them, but for their dragons, because their dragons get horny and they want to have sex. You can't do that when you're 20 dragon uber minutes out. And then finally, the professors are actually doing their jobs and are actually educating them on very important information. I'm sure some of you have been frustrated at the lack of instruction for the last couple of weeks. So this is Professor Devara talking. If you reach beneath your seats, you'll discover why we've been waiting. So they've retrieved several tomes. I guess they mass-produced them using the printing press that they just got in Iron Flame to make copies of these tomes so that everyone can read them. And then Devara goes on to say, read the book and live, don't and die. So this is now required reading, and it's a matter of life and death. I do, however, regret to inform you that a crucial piece of information surfaced during printing and therefore is not included. It has now been confirmed by 3 different sources at high-level Venom. We believe Sage and Maven can and do wield it. So this is a big reveal for them, because up until this point, Navarians thought that they were the only ones with the signets, right? They thought they were super special, and now it's revealed that the Venom pose even more of a threat than they originally did. And everyone's super nervous about that, even though it's not brand new information for us. All this is a waste of time. We're hearing things that we already know for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time in this book. All these classes are useless. Professors barely know anything.
Let me bring you up to speed. We know nothing. You are now up to speed.
And we're not learning about Bethsgaiath, Navarre, or the characters any more than we already have. And not only that, but they will be quizzed on all of this, which I think is the worst part, personally. The one good thing about Devara is that she does not mince words, and she's being very honest with her students. Welcome to the new phase of the battle, where we are not only outnumbered in the sky, but now equally matched on the field in terms of skill. You can and should expect to face a dark wielder with the same abilities as your friends, your squad mates, and yourselves. So now they have to actually practice fighting against each other, which I don't know why they haven't been doing that in the very beginning. These people have terrible foresight, almost as bad as Melbourne's foresight. It's amazing that there's anyone who's still alive at Best Guy War College because they are so terrible at preparing their cadets for battle that I'm surprised they have any survivors at all. So now Professor Devara says that they have to actually practice against each other. With that in mind, the nature of challenges will change under the supervision of Professor to include wielding in order to prepare you for actual combat. What do you mean by actual combat? Like the other battles didn't matter? Some of these people have been in combat and you're pretending like that was all just pretend. I don't know why they don't capitalize the V in Venom. It's just that's another grammar issue that I have with these books. I don't understand that choice. And then Professor Devara finally reveals the smartest decision the school has ever thought of. Now they don't want the cadets to kill each other. All I thought of when I read this, I'm like, now you don't want cadets to kill each other because now there's an actual threat? What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
This entire time you've been fighting a war against Griffin flyers and you wanted them to kill each other back home. You were eliminating these possible soldiers that could help you in the war. And now that there's an actual threat, now you want them to survive? Ugh, it makes absolutely no sense. And we don't meet any of the new recruits. We don't see them crossing the parapet and coming in. I don't even know if they're recruiting any people. Are there new recruits at Best Guy War College? Where are they? Why haven't we seen them train? I guess they're choosing to fight with what little they have. So Devara says, but death is no longer an acceptable outcome. When you face your classmates, the days of settling your scores in the mat are over. We need each and every one of you to survive graduation. Now they have value for human life. That's sweet. Then Devara reveals that they're actually adding a new class to help them better train. We aren't going to throw you to the wolves. The third class you'll be adding will be hands-on approach to prepare you for the Signet against Signet combat. You'll have a rotating roster of professors to benefit from all Signet types, and the Eastern Wing has temporarily loaned us their most powerful writer to start your instruction. Does anyone want to guess who the new instructor is going to be? It's Zayden. Zayden stands next to Professor Corey in the doorway, casually leaning against the frame with his arms crossed with a tiny yet undeniable tilt to his mouth as our eyes lock. I smile instantly. Thank you, gods. He found a way to stay within the wards by teaching. Guess what? Zayden is now a teacher, which means that he and Violet can no longer date. And Violet realizes this and is very upset about it. Teaching. Oh shit. Article 8, Section 1 of Best Gaiath Code of Conduct. My face falls and Zayden tilts his head as shadows brush against my shields. What's wrong? He asks when I let him in. And then Violet tells him, I think our relationship just ended. Violet wants to break up now that Zayden is a teacher and they can no longer date, which is probably the smartest decision she's ever made. And because Violet's not happy about the new decision to make Zayden a teacher, she needs to take out her frustration on everyone else, and her problems are automatically her friend's problems. You don't look happy, Ree notices, shooting me a sideways glance. Why? You two will get to see each other all the time now. Sure, Violet says, every time we have class. Now she takes this moment to go talk to Dane about potentially betraying his father by getting her father's journal. I need your help, and I know it's asking a lot, so I'm just gonna lay it out there and then give you some time to decide. Dane says, are you in trouble? She says, no. I need something my father left my parents' quarters before he died. It's nothing that needed to be burned or anything like that. Research? Dane asks. I nod. It's hidden. The quarters of Esgaiath Commanding General are warded, so only their line by blood or marriage can pass through, and now that bloodline is no longer mine. You'd be better off asking my father yourself. I'm not exactly his favorite person at the moment. So Zayden, because he's being a possessive boyfriend, doesn't like the fact that Violet and Dane are talking, so he approaches them. And listen to what Violet says here because I think it's very funny. So he's ignoring Dane and Bodhi because, again, Zayden is a jerk to everyone but Violet. Allow me to put on my rose-colored glasses to really illustrate how upsetting this conversation is to me, because it just shows their complete and utter lack of communication skills. Violet, Zayden ignores Dane and his cousin, red flag, his voice sliding over my skin like velvet. A word in private. They don't have to go anywhere. They already have a secret room in their mind that they can talk to each other. I shake my head slowly. Why does she not want to talk to her boyfriend in private? Not exactly the best note of confidence there. So she's drawing a boundary. She doesn't want to talk to him, and he is coercing her into this very delicate position. You're now a professor. Clutching the straps of my pack keeps me from reaching for him. I'm a cadet. Not sure why Zayden needed that spelled out for him. It's very obvious what's wrong here. Best and brightest, not acting so bright. So Zayden doesn't see any problem with it, most likely because he's either incredibly stupid by thinking that the rules don't apply to him, or just being a stubborn jerk who thinks that the rules don't apply to him. Oh shit, Dane says quietly. Article 8, Section 1 of the Code of Conduct. Of course he knows. Wait, you two broke up? Hold on, Bodhi. Slow your roll here. Pump the brakes. They haven't even discussed it. Why would you automatically assume that they've broken up already? And then Violet says, yes, relationship of the year, you guys. Great. So Xaden is upset that people are rightfully telling him, hey, this is a boundary. This is a rule. You cannot cross this line. And because Xaden, being Xaden, thinks that he's above the rules, tries to overstep this line. So I guess we could check off another box in the bingo card. I guess we can also put down Kat being catty because she pointed out the fact that Sawyer only has one leg and he can't fly anymore, which is a mean thing to say. Riddick says something stupid, always. There's never not a time that he's not acting stupid. Best and brightest acting stupid. That's just basically any time Violet and her friends are on the page, truth be told. So 2 chapters in and already our bingo card is filling up quite nicely and it smells so delicious. I love it. Of course, Violet wants to keep this under wraps so that way Kat doesn't find out and try to jump Xaden's bones behind her back because she knows that Kat still has feelings for Xaden, but she does not trust Xaden for some reason to not be around Kat. You should be able to trust your boyfriend or girlfriend to not hook up with their ex while they're on a break with you. Just saying. It's a bit of a red flag right there. Because Xaden is unhappy with the fact that he can no longer have a relationship with Violet, he wants to go contest this codex rule. And he decides to go talk to General Atos, which I don't understand why he thinks that General Atos will make an exception for him. So they approach Atos, and Atos addresses him by his new title, Professor Ryerson. Kaori mentioned you might be in here, so I thought I'd handle the awkward business of you inevitably asking for an exemption to the Code of Conduct so you don't embarrass yourself in front of Colonel Panchak. This guy is petty. Is it bad that I'm rooting for General Atos now that he is trying to ruin Violet and Xaden's life?
You can't beat me on the field, so now you're trying to beat me off?
You may want to rephrase that, sir.
I just find it funny at this point, probably because I hate the characters almost as much as he does. Then Violet, of course, is not very happy with this. My stomach dips. I don't need Prince Signet to know this battle isn't going to go our way. He just told you he wasn't going to make an exemption. You should be smart enough and have enough common sense to know this was not going to work out in your favor. Why are these people so stupid? It makes no sense. And then Xaden keeps trying to argue with General Atos and it's just not working. Denied. Atos responds without sparing a second. I'll give you the position, even though I think there are writers better suited for it, but make no mistake, Ryerson, I don't want you here. Xaden refuses to listen to the rules because in his mind, they do not apply to him because he's super special and the main character of his own life. So he tells Violet, don't worry, we'll make it work. Nothing changes. I do want to say one quick thing before we move on is that the teacher and student trope is one of my least favorite tropes in all of literature. I just find it to be so exploitative, so gross, and I hate the way that people romanticize it as this obstacle that our two love interests need to overcome. It's a huge power imbalance between these two people. And I hate that yet again in another feminist-coded romance book, the man is put in a position of power over the woman, and he's going to be the one that acts on his sexual urges more than her. We do what we're best at, Xaden says. Sneak around, at least for now. For now, I agree. And because General Atos is punishing Xaden for allegedly killing Varish, Violet decides to finally set the record straight. Just so you know who to hate, I say, Xaden didn't kill Varish. I did. Atos is very upset at that. So once again, Xaden and Violet have to sneak around like they did in the good old days, aka a year ago. And this is all painted as wildly romantic that these two are now going to have to sneak around as teacher and student. I wonder if he'll grade her their sexy times together. So in the next scene, the lieutenants that are in charge of the task force are meeting up what's called a planning chamber. Really? You couldn't come up with a better name than that? And Violet is meeting up with the rest of the task force and they're talking about strategy. She also reveals to us that her and Xaden are no longer sleeping in the same room. Xaden is actually sleeping in the professor's quarters, which is appropriate. And Xaden is actually coming to the meeting even though he wasn't invited. Because again, rules don't apply to Xaden at all. So he barges into a meeting that he wasn't invited to. And of course, he steamrolls over the entire conversation. We can waste time arguing, Xaden says, or we can just agree that Tyrion isn't going anywhere without Sigale. If they were separated, then they would put their dragons in danger of being in pain. And they would also be in pain, which, again, there's no other logical solution other than having these two be. And then Violet gets very upset at the fact that none of her friends are on the task force, and there is a clear discrimination against flyers because griffins aren't as good as flying, or they can't fly as far or as fast as dragons. There are no flyers or Rishan riders. I fiddle with my pen, so none of Xaden's friends like Imogen or her friends that are griffin flyers like Kat are asked to be on the task force. And of course she wants to change that because she wants to fill her task force force with all of her yes-man friends. That way she can do whatever she wants without having to explain herself to anyone else. And then, of course, Xaden has to bump heads with Captain Grady, who's really in charge. Is this what I can expect, Lieutenant Ryerson? Grady asked, color rising in his neck. You pulling title into military matters? There's a reason aristocrats don't wear black. So I guess it's rank over title now. And then as he's arguing, Violet is noticing that Xaden is slipping, so he's fighting off his venomousness, which makes him evil, which I don't know how she can tell the difference, because this is not unlike Xaden to be a complete Class A jerk to everyone in the room. Violet tries to convince them that they should go to Devrelli, which is where her father was doing his research. The last known communication we have with any Isle Kingdom is Devrelli, and all the other Isle Kingdoms decided to liberate from Navarre and just cut off all communication and never talk to them again, which is understandable. These people are not very good allies to have. And Violet continues, from what I've read, the Merchant Isle trades in more than goods. If there's information to be had there, we can buy it for the right price. We should search all possible avenues and not just the north. So now they need a bargaining chip in order to talk to the Devrelli people. But the main problem is that they are dragon haters. In fact, all the Isle Kingdoms do not like dragons, and for good reason. They pose a threat, they're dangerous, and they also don't listen to human rules, allegedly. Which reminds me, we can also cross off the dragons follow human rules for the 15th time in this book. Also, I guess we could say that there's flyers versus writers conflict because the council is refusing to hire them to go on the task force with them. Even though Violet does make some very good points that they should go to Devrelli, Captain Grady will not have it. Aside from already provided logic, Devrelli requires too high a price for an audience, so south is not an option. And as for the Emerald Sea, perhaps dragons are the reason sailors don't return, which is a good point. Until further notice, assume we will fly northward in the next month. Prepare your supplies, this meeting is adjourned. And Violet is upset about that. And as they are talking, Violet actually reveals to Xaden through the telepathic group chat that Dane is actually taking care of the research in General Atos' office. So Violet is telling him, I don't know the contents of Dad's research, but I do remember him suddenly going secretive with it about 6 months before he died. If he'd want Atos or Markham to have it, he would have left the information in his archives office. So that lets her know that her dad was working on something secretive that he didn't want the government to know about. Violet tells him, don't worry, Dane's agreed to help me find it. And then Xaden cracks his neck. Don't worry and Dane don't belong in the same sentence. Even though she and Xaden want to have a little nice moment alone, Aura actually steps in as General Atos' little agent to cock block them. She's a human cock block. Yes, Aura? I ask as I close my pack. Just waiting to escort you back to the quadrant. She looks pointedly at Xaden. Wouldn't want you getting in trouble or doing something I'd have to report General Atos for, seeing as Grady chose me as your companion. And then she goes on to say, Atos made it clear to the wing leaders that the code of conduct be followed to the letter. Naturally, we've passed that order down through the chain of command. Turns out there are lots of us happy to make your life as miserable as possible. So I guess everyone is rooting for these people to be together. That's interesting. Another thing I want to point out is while they are talking in their minds intrinsically to each other, Grady actually yells silence during their conversation, which was weird because I'm like, is he talking to the people around them? Are they all chatting over each other, or did he actually hear what Violet and Xaden were telling each other? It was just a very strange way to just chronologically have that conversation where they're talking mentally to each other and no one else can hear it, and yet Grady is telling them to be quiet. Who is he saying should be quiet? What's going on? The way that these things are written, the characters are responding to things they should not be responding to, like inner monologue or exposition, and it doesn't make any sense. Chapter 15. So this is taking place 4 days later in the future, and Violet is very upset because she barely talks to Xaden anymore because of their conflicting schedules and also because they are not allowed to be together. And the reason they're outside in this amphitheater is because Xaden is teaching them all how to fight. And I'm saying teaching very loosely because Xaden is not the most competent teacher.
There are over 400 stars in our galaxy, maybe more. No one knows for sure.
He teaches through actions, but the problem is that he doesn't give them any feedback other than you suck, basically. And he's using this as an opportunity to beat up his students with his shadows. It's not very clear how this is supposed to help them in any way, shape, or form. The fact that he is fighting them without getting them any advice on how to actually defeat him. It would make more sense for Xaden to actually help them try to fight him because he's turning venom and they're going to fight him eventually, so why not give them a few pointers? And of course, there has to be at least one student that questions the authority of the teacher, and he decides to pick a fight with Zayden. I believe his name is Lauren. We were just saying that we're not sure. Someone who graduated less than a year ago makes the best teacher. If you think that, go talk to the people who hired him. Why are you bringing this up to him? It's not like Zayden chose to be a professor. Go talk to Atos if you have any issues. I actually agree with him here, because Zayden is not a very good teacher, and he just uses this as an excuse to just take out his anger and frustration on his students, which, Zayden, have you ever tried to build a relationship with your students? Try to meet them where they're at. Really delve into their interests and see if you can up your engagement in class. Because the only thing he's doing is literally eating the snot out of these characters. And even though it's entertaining, it doesn't make for a very good teachable moment. We don't really see any growth in Zayden as a leader. It just shows that he's using his power to literally abuse people. So he teaches Lauren a lesson by basically robbing him of air. Zayden steps to the side as Lauren falls to his knees in the very space Zayden had stood, and the swords fall too, abandoned as Lauren grabs the shadows tightening around his throat. He's literally choking him. What are grounds for firing? Because I feel like that's a pretty fireable offense for a teacher. His face blotches and the other squad starts to shift uncomfortably before Zayden drops his hands. The shadows fall back into position and Lauren gasps for air. And Riddick says, I'm either completely in love with your boyfriend or utterly terrified of him. Not sure at the moment. And then Kat interjects, of course, because she's still in love with Zayden, and she says, you can be both, trust me. And Traeger, who is secretly in love with Kat, says, you shouldn't be either, because of course he feels threatened by Zayden. Violet says, I'm not scared of him, and he's not my boyfriend. And it's not because they actually broke up, it's because they are above this label, because their love is so perfect and amazing that there just isn't a word for it. Agreed, Zayden says, that's far too casual a term for who we are. And then the rest of the afternoon is basically Zayden beating the crap out of his students and not teaching them anything. One by one, he sets everyone on their ass. This is just a pride moment where Zayden is trying to prove that he's better than everyone else, and it's not a very good look. And even though Kat was trained by Zayden, she is still not a very good fighter, which is proof that Zayden is not a very good teacher. And of course, he continues to brag about his abilities because he's so special. I never need to draw a sword because I am the weapon. I'm just good with blades for the fun of it. How is that helpful to your students? They shouldn't rely so heavily on their signets because one day they may not have them. What's the point of that statement? Lauren just proves that he is just as much of a jerk as he always has been. You handing everyone their ass on the mat isn't anything new from last year. It's really sad when the person who is supposed to be the bad guy in the situation is the more realistic, honest, and logical character out of all of them. It's not a very good look for our main characters. And then Zayden is trying to explain his strategy for teaching, but it's not a very good strategy. I want to give you my edge. I want you to learn not just from me, but from one another. What are you learning? What are you teaching them? You're not even teaching them about your magic. You're not even explaining it to them so they can find strategies to try to best you. It's been 3 books and I don't even know what your powers are. How does your magic work? Explain to your students how your magic works so that way they can figure out how to beat you in a fight, because one day they're going to have to, because you're going to be on the other side. This is a perfect learning opportunity for you to help your students now. But you refuse to do that because you don't actually want them to learn how to best you. I'll help expose the weaknesses in your signet so that when you come up against a dark wielder with such a power, you will have already practiced how to defeat them. But why don't you just have them fight each other? Why do they have to fight you? It makes no sense. And then Caroline says that the Griffin don't have any signet power, so what's the point? Even though Kat has a signet power, she can literally manipulate people's emotions. And we don't see any of the other Griffin flyers do that. So by definition, isn't that a signet power? Kat scoffs. We, talking about the Griffin flyers, are far from helpless. You can try your water wielding on me. So I guess Caroline is a Katara of this world, but I'll already be in your head, turning your emotions against you. She's good at it too, I admit. And Zayden chimes in to defend Kat. You'll find that my work can be just as deadly. Zayden agrees. And if you haven't learned how to shield, I suggest you spend some time with Professor Carr. Why can't you teach them? Haven't taught them anything. Are you telling me that you can't teach them how to shield? You taught Violet how to shield. Why can't you teach them? And also, it's not a very good track record if Kat, one of your former students, is a bad fighter. She hasn't learned anything, so why would we expect your other students to learn anything? And then Trigger asks her, you're going to get over him at some point, right? Seems like a waste of time to chase someone who doesn't want you when there are plenty of people who do. Not sure if you needed to announce that to the rest of your classmates, but okay. And then, funnily enough, Violet is happy with this union, but it makes sense because if Kat is distracted with Traeger, she will just leave Zayden alone. Anytime Violet is actually happy for another character, it's because it directly benefits her. If Kat dates someone else, she'll leave Zayden alone, and then she will have Zayden all to herself. And then the class ends after Trigger basically confesses his love for Kat, and then we move on to chapter 16. It's also revealed during class that Violet is the only one that can defeat him, referring to Zayden, but it's never explained why, especially since her powers are so unpredictable because she doesn't know how to actually use them. So I'm not sure how someone who cannot physically use their powers, how they can defeat someone like Zayden, who is obviously an expert with his signet. Where's the logic there? Yaros is just trying to convince us as the reader that Violet is a powerful person without actually showing us, because her ineptitude with her own abilities is staggering. She is completely incapable of actually wielding her own magic. She can't even aim her lightning at her target. All logic just goes out the window because Violet is the main character and therefore she is the exception to the rule. So now Violet is going up against Zayden. I'm just going to skip over the excerpts for now because they do nothing for the pacing, but I will say that the funniest part about this excerpt is the name that's transcribed there. The name is Percival Fitzgibbons. Best name in the whole series, hands down. This is my favorite character. So now it's Zayden and Violet's turn to duel it out on the mat, doing the very thing that Professor Devara promised them they wouldn't have to do. I guess if you're training, it's fine to beat each other senseless, but not when you're actually trying to kill each other. And then as Violet is stepping up onto the mat, shadows fill the mat and devour every ounce of sunlight, leaving me in complete and total darkness in every direction I look. Challenge accepted. This is playing dirty. I lift the conduit to just above my shoulder and release a steady flow of power from my left hand. Because Violet needs a handicap to help her out with her powers, she needs a little handout for everything in her life. And yet she's the strongest Avenger. I guess it's easier to be the strongest Avenger when everyone else's hands are tied behind their back. The dragons aren't even near them. How are they not wielding from the earth if their dragons are not nearby? I don't understand the parameters of their powers. If their dragons are 20 uber minutes away from them, how are they able to access their magic? I have so many questions about the magic system in this world. So Zayden replies, you already have the upper hand. How does she have the upper hand? She literally cannot use her powers without her conduit. He said, I'm just leveling the playing field by making her blind. And Violet doesn't want to fight him because she's scared that she's actually going to electrocute him. How is she the strongest Avenger? She can't even prevent herself from electrocuting her boyfriend. And then, for the first time in this entire book, actually refers to her by her nickname. Come on, Violence, live up to the nickname. I could have killed you a dozen times over by now because you're reluctant to strike. Violet counters this with, and I could kill you with a single non-hypothetical strike. Zayden's really stupid because not only is he endangering himself and Violet, but he's also endangering his other students who he clearly does not care about. And as they're fighting, Zayden uses this moment to sneakily kiss her.
I hope they're using protection, because I am not taking care of that baby.
Which is a cute moment if I actually cared about these people.
No matter how often I see it, the sight of young lovers never fails to make me sick.
And then after they kiss, the shadows fall away and Zayden tells her, you're the only one who could ever best me. And she's like, why me? Probably because he doesn't actually want to hurt you, because he refuses to fight you, which is a huge advantage over the other students. And I'm sure Zayden went on to give her an A+ for doing absolutely nothing. And then he says, because you're the only one who's capable of killing me. Not sure if that's exactly true, because Kat could just manipulate your emotions so someone else can kill you, or you could take your own life too. And what about Riddick? He can literally freeze you, or can literally control fire. She could burn you alive. There's so many other people that can actually hurt Zayden. I don't understand why Violet is the only one who can do it. Anyway, moving on. The next scene, Riddick is bragging about how amazing Violet is. Literally every friend of hers has to be a cheerleader. It's gross how much these people idolize Violet for doing nothing. And it's even more heartbreaking because push comes to shove, she would throw them under the bus to admit that Zayden could live. So they're all visiting the temples after lunch because I guess Rebecca now needs to actually solidify what religion looks like in this world. And then Rhiannon is talking about her fight with Zayden. Ryerson had my own dagger at my throat. I always knew he was powerful, but I never realized he could kill everyone in the room without getting up from his seat. I finished for her. How do they not know this? Have they never seen him in battle? Didn't they just fight a bunch of Venom in Iron Flame? You're telling me that you've never seen this guy use his shadow magic? I find that very hard to believe. Then Riddick goes on to say that Ryerson could wipe out everyone, and I don't know why you would give these people unlimited powers, especially people like Zayden who are a flight risk because they come from the rebellion. He could literally kill everyone at Best Guy War College and then just take over. And then Kat, of course, interjects about her relationship with Zayden because she can't stop thinking about him. She laments that he wasn't at the same same level of power when they were together, which doesn't really make any sense to me because in terms of timeline, how long was he bonded to Sigale? Of course he wouldn't be powerful without a dragon. He would not be able to wield power unless it was from the earth, and that would turn him venom. So I don't understand why Kat is being so hot and bothered by this because he didn't have shadow magic when they were together. And then Kat also marvels at the fact that Violet never seems to be scared of Xaden. Kat, if he was your betrothed, why were you scared of him? Some red flags right there. And he never scares you. Kat stares at me over the table. That's what you said yesterday. He never scares you. Does he scare you? And if he does, why? Do you feel like he would kill you if he had the chance? Because he probably would. Then Violet says, I get scared for him, but haven't been scared of him since threshing. Why? You were never under any threat with him. He was never going to kill you. In fact, it was confirmed in Iron Flame that your mother told him to protect you so he could have more power. Why would he break that promise to your mother? I guess Violet just got amnesia and forgot about that entire conversation. And she continues doubling down on this very untrue statement. He never hurt me. He had his reasons for wanting me dead and instead taught me how to strike a blow on the mat, and that was way before threshing. And then the conversation just drastically shifts to talking about Signets and the fact that Eric, the prince, he hasn't wielded his powers yet. They haven't manifested yet, and they're worried that he might go crazy, which I don't know why the dragons wouldn't just give their powers right away. Why wait and watch them go crazy if you know that's going to eventually kill them, and then that means you're left without a rider. I don't know why these dragons go out of their way to make their lives more difficult. It's not conducive to the characters, and they still talk about how the Tinsic pose as a threat, even though they all are technically intrinsic if they're bonded to a griffin or a dragon. Not sure why there are exceptions there. So here we actually get some description of the gods that I don't find particularly helpful, but it is a bit insightful into who these people worship and why. Your temples to Malak and Dune are disproportionately large compared to the other gods here, Traeger notes, leaning back in his chair, except Amari, of course. It's a regional thing. Sawyer answers, this close up as Scythe, war and death are most on our minds. So true. Thank you for contributing, Riddick. You are a scintillating conversationalist. And Traeger asks about why the scribes don't pray to Hedian for wisdom. Violet waxes on poetically about how knowledge and wisdom are two different things. Knowledge and wisdom are two different things, I answer. Scribes are careful not to ask for what should be earned. And then Dane approaches her in secret and informs her that he will have her father's research to her by Monday. So at least Dane's being helpful. And also it's interesting to me that Amari has such a small temple because it's later revealed that their continent's name is actually based off of Amari. So why her temple wouldn't be bigger, I have no clue. This is one of the only excerpts that I actually want to draw your attention to because I think it's very enlightening in regards to her father and his relationship with not only Violet but with the rest of his family. So this is an excerpt of recovered correspondence of Lieutenant Colonel Asher Sorengale to Violet Sorengale. My brightest light, I meant to prepare you but only had time for half the lessons you need. Half the history, half the truth, and now time runs short. I failed Brennan the day I watched him walk the parapet. Failed Mira when I could not stop her from following, but I fear my death will fail you. I want to draw your attention to his term of endearment for her, which is my brightest light, as if she is the golden child to him, because she and him were both scribes together, so it makes sense that they would be a little bit closer, but it sounds like he had his favorite, and his favorite was Violet, which is unfortunate for Mira, because it just seems like Mira is left out of the loop a lot of the times, and I think that's really unfair for her, because she is a reliable ally, and she's also very powerful. She's the reason why the wards are as strong as they are right now. I don't know why he wouldn't clue her to the corruption of Basgaiath, especially when it directly affects her. So not the best parenting on his part, if you ask me. And then Rebecca Yaros introduces us to a plethora of characters that have absolutely nothing to do with the plot. They're completely inconsequential, and that is because they are all dead.
Yes, very sad. Anyway,
Nadia, Axel, Carissa, Tomny. I'm sorry, what are these names? And then Violet, true to form, approaches it with the most remorseless response ever. Hearing the names of every member in active service who has died the previous day takes longer than the typical quadrant death roll. But I appreciate the change. It feels right to honor those losing their lives. It also serves to remind me, though, that Major Devara has called a moratorium on killing one another within our walls. There's an enemy just waiting to do so the second we leave. That's one way of looking at a funeral. Violet doesn't care about any of these people other than the fact they serve as a reminder to her to be more grateful, which is probably one of the most out-of-touch, privileged things I've ever heard Violet say. So then Then finally, Dane comes in clutch, and then he brings Violet the journal from her father, and the journal has a code. So the journal has this very special lock on it, and if you don't solve the riddle and you don't put in the correct letter code, then there are these ink cartridges that bleed into the book and basically erase everything that was written within it, which is a fun kind of lore. I like those little idiosyncrasies when it comes to the magic, and it's just a really fascinating idea, and I wish that Euros would use creativity like that more often in her world building, but I guess when you are forced to write a book every 6 months, it's hard to think of creative ideas like that. So Violet gets the journal and she discovers that there is a code and she has to solve the riddle to properly open up the journal. I pick up the scrap piece of parchment Dad had stashed in a roll and read his formal handwriting again. First love is irreplaceable. And then Violet goes on to say, fuck. Nothing Dad wrote was ever this simple. So what the hell is that supposed to mean? It probably just means what he wanted it to mean, because he wanted it to be easy enough for you to crack the code and not overthink it, so that way you can actually get to the research within. And she doesn't get it right away. She has to have other people solve the riddle for her. This person is supposed to be the most intelligent, clever character of the entire series, and everything needs to be handed to her and spoon-fed to her very slowly and carefully, so that way she can get it.
Talk to me like I'm 5.
She is so unaware of the world around her at all times. I'm amazed that she doesn't run into more walls. So Violet brings the scroll to her friends and they try to solve the riddle together. So they're trying to figure out whose first love it is. So who is the riddle about? So they're going through the list of all the people that Asher Sorrengail, so her father, loved the most. And they wonder if it's about his first loves. And Violet says this: honestly, it's not like my dad to make it about himself. Both Lilith and Violet are too obvious, despite the fact that both of their names have 6 letters in them, and it's funny that they automatically assumed Violet, because again, Violet is the most special one. Of course she is her father's favorite, am I right? So going through the list and everyone's saying, okay, maybe this is about Mira, and they turn to Violet and they ask her who was Mira's first love. Violet does not know. How do you not know who your sister has dated? You went to the same school as her. You've been around her for years, and you're telling me you don't know who your sister's partners were? And then they ask her about Brennan, and Violet once again does not know who's Brennan's first love was. It's because Violet has her head shoved so far up her own ass that she does not look around and realize that other people have lives too that are not completely revolving around her, and she cannot actually recognize that these people are autonomous human beings who love and live and have lives of their own outside of hers, because in her mind, everyone here is an NPC, a red shirt. They are just here to service Violet, and she does not care about them. They have no identity outside of her and Xaden. According to Violet, her and Xaden are the only ones that have found love, that experience love, that understand love, and everyone else, it's just a farce. And this just made me lose even more respect for Violet as a character. The fact that she is so unaware of the world around her, and the fact that her siblings could have relationships at all, she doesn't even consider that they're part of that narrative. Who's Mira's first love? We asked. I think, tilting my head, I'm not sure she's ever really been in love. Or if she has, she's never said anything to me about it. You're telling me that people at school don't gossip? You probably would have found out regardless if you actually bothered to ask anyone around you a question that did not relate directly to you. Oh my god. I hate hypocrites. And most of all, I hate Violet. If there are no more Violet haters, I'm dead. At least she knows that Brennan did date someone once, but not once did she ever consider actually going up to them and asking who their first loves were. She just decided to go run to her friends and expect them to magically solve the riddle of the Sphinx for her. She is so reliant on other people around her to do her bidding. Even in regards to her own family, she expects people to solve her father's riddle that was meant for her to solve. It's ridiculous. So as class continues, we'll see a lot more of these couples develop over time. As someone who is a major fan of Imogen, I'm really happy to see her wind up with one of the good guys at Best Guy for College, Garrick. So Riddick is catcalling Imogen and Garrick, and he does that one really annoying thing that a lot of characters in comedy settings do, which is where they say what's on their mind, and then immediately afterwards they're like, did I just say that out loud? Whoops. And it's a huge pet peeve of mine. It's an unnaturally forced comic moment that the author wants to use in order to prove that, hey, Riddick is such a funny guy. Isn't he so funny? And I'm like, no. I do not like this character because he's trying too hard to be the funny guy. at least Imogen and Garrick are happy. So as they continue this training, fighting montage, Garrick at one point almost takes out Violet. Actually, he almost takes off her head. And Xaden, true to form, is super possessive and territorial of Violet, and he feels the need to defend her honor by attacking Garrick, someone who is supposed to be one of his best friends. Xaden says too close, referring to the fact that he almost took Violet's head off. I look up to see him taking a step in Garrick's direction, rage etched in the hard lines of his face. I guess we can put down that Violet gets injured because she technically did, because Garrick was about to take her head off, and look at that, we almost have a bingo. We're so close. Now Violet is the one who has to intercept between him and Garrick before Xaden does something that he will certainly regret later, because Xaden is extremely emotional at all times. He gets so irrationally angry because he cannot regulate his emotions. This would make way more sense if Rebecca Yarros really used this as a focal point for how evil the Venom are. Everyone's just shrugging off his insane behavior, all because it's Xaden. Boys will be boys, Xaden will be Xaden. He flies off the handle, goes on a rampage, and everyone is just supposed to ignore it and move about their day as if nothing ever happened. I would really love to see Xaden actually be held accountable for his terrible behavior, but I seriously doubt that's ever going to happen. But Garrick is not the only one causing trouble on the ring, as Violet feels this prickling in her neck, because guess who suddenly decided to show up? None other than Violet's ex. So His Royal Highness Prince Halden arrives on the scene, and immediately his eyes go straight to Violet, and Xaden gets very jealous. He makes some offhand remarks at Violet, talking about how impressive her fighting abilities have become, and Violet is coaching herself on how to calm down and regulate her emotions in order to appear aloof, like his presence doesn't really matter to her, even though later we'll find out that it actually does. So Halden makes his presence known at Basgiath War College, and he feels the need to just randomly pop up in the most inconvenient of places for Violet and try to convince her to take him back. And he's not the only one who is there, but his own personal lady bodyguard, Captain Anna Winshire. She isn't just the infantry liaison for the quest squad, she's Halden's. I've been naive to assume he'd removed himself from the task force, and if Halden ever realizes that Xaden is the reason his twin isn't breathing, well, he won't be as understanding as Auric. This is bad. Yeah, why is Auric totally fine with the fact that Xaden killed his brother? I certainly wouldn't be as forgiving, but since Auric is supposed to be the good one, of course he lets this heinous crime against humanity slide. And then Xaden, just like the big bad wolf, he huffs, he puffs, and he leaves the room before he can cause any real trouble. Xaden's gaze narrows as it jumps from Halden, between Halden and me, and then he turns his attention to the sparring match. So it's safe to say that Xaden is not the biggest fan of Halden, and vice versa. And Violet wants to keep it strictly business, not risky business, as she turns to Halden and tries to speed run through the polite proclivities of their reunion, which is going to be awkward no matter which way you slice it. He says, "You aren't going to ask me how I've been. My brother's missing." So I guess that Halden is actually competing with Xaden not only for Violet's heart, but also for the Douchebag of the Year award. It's going to be a tough competition, you guys. I'm not sure who's going to win. And then Violet, finally able to keep one secret for once in her life, pretends like she doesn't know anything. Is he, I fold my arms, or did Cam just need some space from your ego? So it's safe to say that Auric may not be the biggest fan of Halden as well. And then Halden, because he is a crown prince of Navarre, he cannot fathom a world where he cannot get every girl that he ever desires, and he plows on despite the fact that Violet does not want to continue this conversation any longer than it needs to be. So he says, "No hello, not even a compliment on the tailoring of my uniform? What a narcissistic peacock. Or the fresh haircut? I'm heartbroken by." So it's very clear to me that Halden is the kind of guy who needed validation for everything, and it makes me lose even more respect for Violet, realizing that she dated this douche canoe for years and that he was her first love, and he has a personality of a wet mop. Violet, you're attracted to this jerk. Why? I'll tell you why. It's because he's a crown prince in Navarre, and she's a gold digger social climber who wanted to ascend to the throne and become queen, which no doubt will happen anyway because of what happens at the very end of this book, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And then Halden, of course, is still seeking praise for doing the bare minimum, for helping Violet out, you know, his ex-girlfriend that he cheated on. "You wound me," Halden rubbed his chest. "Yes, I cheated, but you have to remember I was still suffering from the loss of my twin." That's an interesting excuse. If anyone used my death as an excuse for why they cheated on their girlfriend, I would definitely come back just to haunt their penis, assuming that person is a man. Grief doesn't excuse any of that, never did. And then Halden says, and here I thought you'd thank me for offering to step in and agree with you in regard to your upcoming mission. How so? My brow scrunches. He reaches into his uniform pocket and retrieves a missive bearing a broken wax seal of Viscount Dacaris. So, of course, he read her letter. Why wouldn't he? In regard to your search, King Cortland of Dorelli has agreed to a single meeting. Noble blood only for the reasonable price of an Emilian citrine. So now we have another MacGuffin object that we need to look for, very similar to Iron Flame. Rebecca Yarros blatantly recycles the same plot lines over and over. She's just filling up these pages as this kind of literary filibuster to get us from one book to the next. And these books wouldn't be so bad if they offered anything new or original, but we spend hundreds of pages watching Rebecca Yarros plagiarize herself, continue to use the same exact tired cliches she has this entire series. And I understand why a lot of her fans are losing faith in her is because they are sick and tired of seeing the exact same tropes play out. People don't like being sold the same book that's masquerading as its own unique original idea when it's not. It's clear that Rebecca Yarros has completely run out of ideas, and that's really hurting her series in the long run. I don't think they should have elongated the series from a trilogy to a 5-part series. I think they should have kept it down to 3 because most of this is just fluff. And I also hate the whole love triangle thing where the author knows who the main character is going to end up with, so the character assassinates the other love interest. We saw this with Dane in the first book where he stole Violet's memories without her consent. We also saw this in the second book with Kat acting like a crazy ex-girlfriend by fighting over Xaden with Violet.
She's a crazy ex-girlfriend. What? No, I'm not.
And then in this book, we have this narcissistic, self-absorbed prince who cheated on her. So we know that there's absolutely no way that these people are even going to get together. There's no competition whatsoever. And it's very obvious who the favorite is. You'll notice this in other romantic books like Powerless, Red Queen, Lightlark. All of these authors already know who the character is going to end up with. And the problem that I have with this trope is they don't make each of the potential love interests out to be their own complex person. They either have to be bad or good. There's no nuance there. And I think what really annoys me the most about this whole ordeal is the fact that not once has any author actually suggested the idea of polyamory when it comes to these love trolls. Why choose one? ¿Por qué no los dos? Why not have both? And honestly, if Rebecca Yarros even toyed with that idea a little bit, I think that would make this way more fun, to make Halden out to actually be a victim of grief, where he was going through a lot and he was actually remorseful and he actually wanted to work this out with Violet, where she not only forgave him, but was also willing to overlook the past and move on to a future together. I think that would have been really interesting. But no, Xaden has already been confirmed as Endgame. We've destroyed any chance of any interesting love triangle drama. And I also do want to mention that during this entire interaction she's having with her cheating, lying ex, that Violet is ogling him with her eyes. She's admiring his sandy brown hair, his illustrious green eyes, like she's drooling over him. And then 5 minutes later, she turns around and tells Xaden that there's nothing to worry about. I just find that it's incredibly funny that Yarros goes out of her way to show that Violet still has lingering feelings for Halden, but then she doesn't really grapple with those feelings. She just suppresses them and pretends like they don't exist, which is not a very healthy way of dealing with our emotions. And here we see Violet trying to rationalize with herself and also Halden her relationship with Xaden. Despite the fact that she said that they broke up and that they're no longer boyfriend-girlfriend, she still feels the need to defend her relationship. If you're asking if I'm in love with him, then the answer is wholeheartedly yes. If you're prodding to see if we're still together, then let me assure you we're adhering to the code of conduct in the way you never bothered to do. You can report that to your father. Basically telling him that they're still technically apart, even though they're still together. Like, why would you open up any kind of questioning when it comes to the status of your relationship? Because some men will see this as an encouragement and continue to pursue you harder because they don't see the other guy as a threat. So it's very funny to me that Violet is honest in a way where she puts her foot in her mouth and she creates more drama for herself. You don't even need to explain yourself to this guy. Your relationship is none of his business. And anyway, going back to the citrine. So the object that they now have to find in order to negotiate with Devreli Valley is called the Emilian Citrine, and luckily for us, Halden, like everyone else in this book, has to explain it to Violet, and more specifically to the reader. We're seeing everything through Violet's eyes, so we're learning along with her, kind of like a fish out of water experience, which would make way more sense if Violet was brand new to this entire experience, but she's not. The Emilian Citrine is a lesser magic amplifier, worn by one of the members of the First Drift. If you're willing to retrieve it, I'm willing to order Grady to change courses. His intentions are very selfish. He's not doing this to benefit Navarre. He's doing this so Violet can be indebted to him. But if he was actually a decent guy, so now they have to go find this rock that will help the Griffins amplify their lesser magic. Understandably, the Navarrians will not want to get this amplifier for the Paromish because then the Griffins will be stronger. Even though we're fighting on the same side, I'm fully convinced that the Navarrians started the war between them and the Paromish and played it off like they were the victims. I would not be surprised if it was later revealed that Navarre was the one that instigated this war with the Griffin Flyers, but that's my conspiracy theory. And then Halden continues to assure her that he will actually be on her side. If you want to go, I'll step in on your behalf. I owe you that at least. And title overpowers rank every day. So again, if he was actually a decent guy, this would be seen as a positive interaction. And even if he didn't end up with Violet, it still would be nice to see a character acting selflessly like this with no reward for them at the very end. I feel like that would be very interesting to see Violet misinterpret his intentions as transactional. I feel like Halden is another missed opportunity when it comes to character work, because it would have been really interesting for him to turn from this douche canoe prince into someone who is actually a decent person, who decided to go out of his way to help Violet, even though he would get nothing in return. But again, Rebecca Yarros is not intent on making actually interesting characters. She just wants to make dull, two-dimensional archetypes that the reader can't even care for because they are caricatures of real people. Violet was so head over heels with this guy at some point, and he obviously broke her heart, and she never really got to deal with it in a very healthy way. It would be nice for them to actually get on friendly terms, but he has to be the evil ex-boyfriend, so that's never going to happen. So Violet keeps pushing back against this guy because he does not seem to understand the word no. So Violet doubles down on her feelings about Xaden. I am in love with him. I haven't so much as thought about you in years. Don't chase just because you like a challenge, you'll lose. Great, now he's gonna want to chase you more. Why would you do that? Whenever people say, don't do something, guess what is the first thing that person is now motivated to do? The one thing you told them not to do. Just leave it alone. Just say, I'm in love with him, goodbye, and walk away. It's really not that hard. But at least Halden does have some merit and some usefulness in this scene because he holds the very key to Violet's father's journal when he says this. Anyone who's ever dated a writer knows their first love is their dragon. Once you accept that, another man hardly feels like a challenge. And that's when Violet realizes that's the key to the riddle. Violet solved it. And now she has to go find the journal and open it up. But I also found this statement to be very interesting because wouldn't that also count for Violet? Because if her first love is her dragon, wouldn't that mean that her relationship with Xaden is also doomed? And then Halden, because he does not understand consent, is trying to pressure Violet into going on a date with him. Besides, with all this time we have coming up together on this mission, I thought maybe you'd at least be willing to have a quiet dinner with me. Tell me you don't let your non-boyfriend control you. Allow me to apologize properly the way I should have 3 years ago. You already apologized. I don't see how dinner is going to help you in any case. Violet will go on to say that Xaden doesn't control her, despite evidence to the contrary. Even though we've established that we cannot kill the Crown Prince of Navarre, apparently we can assault him with shadows and get away with it. Shadows blast straight through the wars and hit Halden in the chest like a battering ram, sending the Crown Prince of Navarre flying backward straight into the rock wall. And this is Xaden lashing out and assaulting Halden because he almost touched his girlfriend's hair. A true sign of any healthy relationship. Truth be told, I don't know what Violet saw in this guy. It's not like she is also a self-absorbed Nepo baby with a penchant for trouble. Oh wait, also she describes this as a rock wall, which upon my initial reading of that sentence, I thought they had a rock climbing wall and I got really excited, but it's just a wall made of rock. So Violet is the one that goes to comfort not Xaden, but Halden, her ex, You're really putting fuel on the fire there, girlie. What are you doing? Halden, I rush to kneel by his side, and the shadow evaporates like it was never there. Are you all right? And then his guard comes up to see if he's all right. She's completely useless at this point, because if she was actually around, he probably wouldn't have gotten hurt. And then Xaden tries to explain away his outburst by implying that Halden was threatening Violet. Sorry about that, Xaden says, his tone implying otherwise. I was blocking a potential lethal blow to the first year. Isn't Violet a second year? Isn't she a sophomore? I'm so confused. What is this timeline? And seem to have knocked the wind right out of you. Of course, this is a lie, and Xaden admits that in his mental group chat with Violet. He was going to touch you. And then Violet says, because that's a mature response. Yes, you are dating a child, a zombie man-child. You really do have terrible taste in men. So, you know how Halden was making a sly joke that Xaden was controlling Violet? Here, he says, I don't control Violet. Never have, never will. No, that's not correct, sir. In the first book, when you found out that she was bonded to you through your mated dragons, and that if she dies, you die, you enlisted Liam as a bodyguard to guard her at all times without her consent. In the second book, you controlled the entire narrative of the rebellion by not telling her anything rightfully. But you kept manipulating her and gaslighting her into thinking that she was a problem. And then in this book, you attack anyone who dares suppose a threat to her, when in reality, you are the biggest threat to her right now. And the whole reason why Violet is not going on the quest right now is because of Xaden. Xaden's the one who wants to stay at Beskaya. Xaden is the one in the driver's seat, and Violet's just along for the ride, but he's continually trying to convince her that she's the one actually driving the car. It makes no sense whatsoever. There is a huge power imbalance between them, and Riaros is trying her darndest to convince us that they are actually equals, when in reality they're not. Yet again, we have another useless excerpt shoehorned right in the beginning of the chapter that really destroys the pacing. Violet goes to see if Halden is okay, and then his guard, who Violet realizes has more than just a professional relationship with Halden, seems very concerned that he is actually hurt. And then Violet confirms this theory of hers by telling the reader that Halden's type is redheads. Why would he date Violet in the first place if he likes redheads is beyond me. And Violet is happy that Xaden, in his violent act of rage, did not kill the heir to the throne. And I'm curious to see what would have happened if he actually did. Xaden has absolutely no regard for himself or the people around him. When he acts out on his most violent, visceral urges, he is constantly putting himself and his loved ones at risk. He could have been arrested and even sentenced to death for killing the prince. Not to mention he would leave Violet vulnerable, who is also connected to him empathically to the point where if either one of them dies, then the other dies as a result of that. So why would he constantly put himself in these situations in which he could not only harm himself but also Violet, the woman that he is so fiercely trying to protect? Maybe someone should just tell Xaden to take his Xanax before he comes to the mat. Mental health is important. So after Xaden goes all Kill Bill on Halden's ass, Violet takes it upon herself to apologize on Xaden's behalf, because this man has all the self-control of a toddler who needs mommy to clean up his messes. And Xaden is not doing a very good job of covering up his second signet because he's saying, I had a feeling that he was going to attack someone. And that is an instinct directly linked to his intrinsic ability, so I don't know why he would draw even more attention to himself, knowing that he has multiple secrets, like the fact that he's a Venom and the fact therefore putting himself at risk. Honestly, they should just arrest this guy and put him in solitary confinement until he cools off, because this guy is way too volatile for his own good. It's also funny that Xaden implies that he can't control Violet even though he is her teacher, and he is in that powerful position where he does have to tell her what to do. So I think it's just very short-sighted that Xaden and Violet are trying to pretend like a lot of the conflict in their relationship does not exist. So after this whole altercation, Euros immediately cuts to a completely different scene in which Violet is implementing the name of her mother's dragon, a dragon who is still MIA, by the way, again foreshadowing to General Sorrengail's potential reappearance in the series. So Ree is sitting there with her as she is trying to open up her father's journal, and she is asking her about the prince. Prince, a character that she has completely forgotten about for the past 2 books. Oh, and why is that, you may ask? Because he didn't actually exist until Onyx Storm. We could talk about how your non-boyfriend threw your clearly ex-boyfriend into the wall, Rhys says, or even chat about how you've never mentioned you were in a relationship with the prince. I promised myself I wouldn't give him an ounce of my headspace when he turned out to be the asshole everyone warned me. Who is everyone? You mean your mom and dad? Who had a correspondence that you had terrible taste in men? Xaden definitely needs to take some anger management classes in order to help calm him down. You can't just blame this on the fact that Xaden is turning venom, because the venominous is heightening his emotions. This is Xaden just dialed up to 10. You can't really blame something that wasn't there. Same with Jack. Jack was always a jerk. The venom part of him just made him even more of a jerk. None of this is brand new behavior, and the fact that no one else is surprised that Xaden is acting this way speaks volumes about his character more than anything else. And this very statement right here goes to show why Rhiannon is my favorite, because she calls Violet out for being a gold digger, a prince, a duke. Clearly, you have a type. It's very obvious that Violet is an unapologetic social climber. All of the people that Rebecca Yarros has shown us that she has dated in the past have all had some ties to a royal throne, proving Violet's ambition to rise to a place of power without doing any of the necessary work to get there. This is the strongest Avenger, mind you. And then Violet writes off Xaden's outburst by saying that it's actually the venomous rising up inside of him. But Xaden has struck out and fought on Violet's behalf before. He has been violent in the past, and it is very obvious that his venomous is heightening his anger and his emotions. But I would like to see Violet being very surprised at the way that Xaden is acting, because Violet is putting on her rose-colored glasses and just pretending like her boyfriend has always been this perfect angel, when that's not true, and we know that's not true. And then they start to talk about the journal, and she explains to Rhys the logic behind the name that she's now putting in the journal, which is Aimsir, which was her mother's dragon. She neglects to tell her best friend how she came to this conclusion by leaving out the fact that Halden was the one who gave her this light bulb moment, because even Violet doesn't like to admit her own flaws, or the fact that she needed help decoding her own father's riddle, a riddle that she should have known because she and her father were so close, and the fact that she wasn't able to decipher this without help is rather embarrassing. She reasons that Lilith is not the right answer because it's too obvious. Anyone else would have entered it without a second thought and ruined the book. No, he left this one for me. And yet you couldn't figure it out. Your ex-boyfriend did. Man, maybe he should have given it to Halden instead. And then she opens it up to look at the title page, and because everything revolves around Violet, there is a letter from her father addressed to her. In the letter, he gives her some basic instructions. Within these pages, you'll find my careful study of the Second Glint Uprising, but my daughter, remember that I taught you about history. It is simply a collection of stories, each influenced by those that happened before and steering the ones to come. I wrote this study so it'd be read by others, but understood by you. Because again, Violet is the smartest girl in the world, despite the fact that she couldn't solve the riddle of his journal. You'll find the connection between the uprising and the pursuit of Feathertails to be both alarming and enlightening. So there has been a search for the Feathertails before, but I guess their government once again lied to them. And then he tells her to not embark on this journey alone, but with Dane, because Dane actually speaks the language of the Devray people. Quick thing I want to say about the father as well is, if he knew this was a life or death situation and this information could potentially save the world, why wouldn't you make the riddle of the Sphinx obvious? Why wouldn't you want to share this information with everyone? Why does everything have to rest on Violet's shoulders? And if she is the brightest light to her father, why was the riddle about her? Why was it about Lilith? Especially if he doesn't even trust this woman. And also, why would you only have one bit of security? Why not have invisible ink in the book too? There's so many missed opportunities. If you really wanted to protect this journal at all costs, you're making it easy to break in. No offense. He also tells her that if Dane turns to the dark side with his father, that she shouldn't be friends with him anymore. Yet again, another man telling Violet what to do and how to live her life. Fabulous. What a feminist icon. You've always struggled with Glish, but I made sure Dane would be capable. If he follows in the footsteps of his father, you must find the strength to let go of your affection for him. From Corden, book passage to Relly, you will be safe beyond the reach of magic there, and quietly seek the merchant. Take her the rarest item you possess. Be sure it's truly exceptional. Do not set another in your stead. Beware their king. He bears grudges and speaks only in profit. I'm so sorry this falls to you, my brightest light. Trust only Mira. And then he says, love dad. Because apparently in this book, they call their father's dad and their mother's mom. So then Violet starts to question the secrets of her father. How did he know about a merchant in Deverelli? And then she peruses back over the words seek the weapon. So he's telling her to actually go find Andarna's people, or what she interprets to be Andarna's people. But if time is indeed run out and you seek the weapon to defeat those who you only learned about through lore, and abandon your robes and ride for Corden. Which is interesting that he is asking her to ride. What does he want her to ride in? A boat? Back then, Violet was still a scribe. She wasn't a writer, so I don't know what he's telling her to ride. So this whole book alludes to the fact that her father knew about the venom, and he knew about Andarna's people, and that they could be the key to stopping the venom once and for all. This whole series would have been way more cool if Violet was a scribe and Xaden was a writer, in my opinion. Oh, Andarna and Tyr are fighting once again, which means another check off our bingo card. And then, of course, Xaden appears because why not? He always has to insert himself where he is not wanted. And he is here to pick a fight with Violet over Halden. Yay. We interrupt your normal programming to bring you scenes from a shitty relationship. Alright, I need to put my rose-colored glasses on for the full effect as we read this passage between two people who are just perfect for each other. What are you doing? I whisper. Did you love him? The question is a low rumble of sound. And then Violet, because she's worried that they're going to get in trouble because he and Violet are not supposed to be together outside of class hours, she says someone's going to see you. Did you love him? Xaden lifts his head and pins me with a look that borders on feral. I have to know. I can handle it, but I have to know. Oh, for Amari's sake. I was with Halden years ago. I picked up on a lot of things he was thinking. Again, alluding to his intrinsic abilities. And then she blinks because she realizes that he also has a second signet that he's been concealing from her. Picture of a healthy relationship, the fact that they are incapable of communicating. It's just tiring at this point. Did you love him? He repeats. And then Violet accuses him of being jealous, and Xaden, of course, says, yes, I am jealous. So when the prince of our realm walks into my classroom and starts talking to the woman I love with what can only be considered intense familiarity, and then has the audacity to ask her out right in front of me, naturally I'm going to get jealous and put him into a wall. I might have turned, but I'm still a man of my word when it comes to you. And then Violet tries to assure him that he has nothing to be worried about. Love of my life, you have nothing to be jealous of. Did you love him, Violet? You have to tell me. Why? Why does she have to tell you? What does it matter? It's in the past. Let it stay in the past. We've all made mistakes. We all loved people that we shouldn't have loved. Why does it matter? Just move on, grow up, go on your fucking quest. Because I am tired and I cannot take one more moment of you two fighting.
Excuse me, I need to shout.
These people can never have one happy moment together because they got together way too quickly. So now Rebecca Yarros tried to drum up all of this drama for no reason other than for the sake of conflict. Why can't these two just be happy for once? I don't understand it. And then Violet drops the bomb that she did love him, but not the way I love you, I admit softly. And then Xaden confirms you loved him. Violet defends herself. I was 18. We were only together about 7 months. A little before conscription day until December. So he was at conscription day. Where's his dragon? Where did it go? Did he get rejected and he had to go back home? What's happening here? What is this timeline? The timeline of this series makes absolutely no sense. And then Violet continues, I was infatuated and enamored. And at the time, that rush of utter beguilement, Rebecca, you already have the words infatuated and enamored, which by the way, mean the same thing in the same sentence as beguile. Why do you need 3 different words to describe your crush? Why? Just use one. But no, we have to jam-pack every single word that Rebecca Yarros knows just so she can prove to us that she knows how to use a thesaurus. So the guy who doesn't control her life at all is demanding an answer from her. Powerful stuff. And then, because Violet is terrible at any form of communication, she deflects the conversation to Xaden's relationship with Kat. It's really hard for me to see you anywhere near Kat. I never loved Kat. Xaden's head whips up. Sure, the idea of Halden putting his hands on you makes me want to put him back into the wall. And then Xaden talks about the fact that he is considering killing the prince. He can't touch me, Violet says, even though he will and will continue to touch you without your consent. And then, in order to solve their problems, they start making out. This whole scene is very reminiscent to me of the 50 Shades of Grey franchise, where the one solution to their problem was sex, which also reminds me that is another check in the bingo card. Okay, so they're making out, and then Xaden, because he started the whole kissing thing, has to be the one that finishes it, and he asks Violet to do something to take his mind off of his situation, so to speak. Yet again, Violet has to be the one to help regulate his emotions. He is incapable of controlling himself as per usual. I don't think it's very healthy that your current boyfriend is having a conniption over the fact that you had a sexual/dating history with someone else before you even met him. But I guess toxic relationships sell more than healthy relationships, so we're stuck with these two for the rest of the series, unfortunately. I just have a sneaking suspicion that he really is just upset that she didn't lose her virginity to him, because that is a very common trope in fantasy, and he just pretends to like that she feels sexually liberated because it directly benefits him. I don't really think you need to justify a romantic relationship with the Prince of Navarre. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. So one thing I think is very interesting about this conversation is the fact that Violet feels, to this day, so threatened with Kat, even though Kat and Xaden have not talked. They have not exchanged words with each other this entire book. The only time they had any interaction, Xaden was kicking her ass on the mat, and then Kat was upset, and that was it. That was the whole experience. I don't know why Violet feels so threatened, other than the fact that she's just trying to project her insecurities onto Kat, and Xaden's doing the same with Halden. And I also want to point out that both of them have assaulted each other's exes out of jealousy and rage. So Violet is not as innocent as she likes to pretend that she is. This concludes scenes from a shitty relationship. We now return you to your normal programming. Violet talks about the journal and the fact that she cracked the code, and her father told her to go to Devrelli. And then she explains the stipulations that we'll need in order to get an audience with the king. Searching the Isles means we need the audience with the king, which requires leaving the wards to get an artifact for the king and calling in help from Halden. But it's easier said than done because the artifact is actually in occupied territory, and because they're on a ticking time clock, they need to figure this out as soon as humanly possible. Xaden actually suggests that he would go and get it for Violet, despite the fact that if they ever do stay apart for a very long period of time, it would be very painful for them. And if I ask you to stay behind, all cozy and safe while I get it. I shake my head. Yeah, that's what I thought. But Violet says she wants to leave as soon as possible to go on the task force to find Indarna's people, and then we go to chapter 19. So in chapter 19, we're following Violet and the task force as they are going on their scavenger hunt to find the citrine gem, which was the thing that Halden said they needed in order to negotiate with the King of Devrelli. And Violet and Tyrion are talking as they are writing. It feels like there's more power out here than usual, I tell Tyrion. There's actually less. The Venom saw to that, he replies, but you grow more powerful every day, more capable of recognizing what once was entirely invisible to you. I could recognize it, and Darna chimes in, if you ever let me come with you. And she says, I can burn Venom. But Tyrion tells her that was only like a one-time thing. I've told you a dozen times before. First fire burns the hottest, which could explain the phenomenon. This mission is dangerous enough without adding a desirable target for any lurking dark builders. Because again, Theophany wants Indarna and Violet and Xaden, and if Indarna is there with them, then she would be in trouble. And she says that they're all busy to the south. So does that imply that the Venom are also looking for Indarna's people? They're really streets ahead of you guys, aren't they?
You have to ask, your street's fine.
So they're flying to this place called Anka in order to retrieve this citrine gem thing. And as they are approaching, they realize that it's completely empty. There's no one there. It's completely deserted. And then he grumbles and complains about the fact that he has to follow human rules, despite the fact that we know that dragons don't have to follow human rules. Just because I accepted the terms of the mission does not mean I like them, Tyrion grumbles. But Xaden is there, as well as Aura, the one person who's acting as a physical cockblock for the two of them, who directly reports back to Atos if anything goes awry. And then as they are surveying the scene, Violet expresses her frustration to Xaden, who tells her to basically calm down. Calm, cool, collected, which is an ironic statement coming from someone who literally almost killed the crowned Prince of Navarre because he almost touched his girlfriend. So one of the interesting things about this passage is that this city was built to keep dragons out, so the streets are very narrow so they can't walk through them. They made it out of wood, which makes it incredibly flammable, which should give you some idea of what's going to happen next. And because Aura is an idiot and a fire wielder, she has a bit of a jump scare moment and she takes out her flint and the entire town goes down in flames and they barely escape with their lives. The door across the street swings open with an ear-screeching creak. and my head whips around toward the sound, fear launching my heart into my throat as a figure steps out of the shadows. Vi, watch out! Aura's going to. Zayden's warning her to watch out, and I throw myself at Aura, but the damage has been done. Fire sparks and spews from her hand like dragon flame and engulfs the doorway. We land in a tangle of limbs, and I narrowly keep from smacking my head on the stone of the stoop as a wave of heat blasts the side of my face, lighting up the night. Dread seizes, and then they turn around and realize that Captain Grady, one person who is taking Violet's place as a leader of the task force, is on fire, and then he passes away. So at least he's out of the picture, thus leaving the leadership role in the task force open for Violet to take. Oh, and look at that, we have our very first mention of Onyx for the first time in 30 pages. I have to give Rebecca Yarros some kudos for restraint. So as the town is slowly burning down, Violet, Zayden, and the task force are running to try to find a place where they can safely mount their dragons. And as they're running, Aura is remorseful of her mistake. And as they are trying to get to Terran, all of a sudden a wyvern swoops in out of nowhere and kills Aura. Two people who were not on Team Violet, who were human obstacles in her path to success, are dead. That's 2 down and plenty more to go because now the real antagonists are at the scene. And that is another bingo card. Check for Venom attack. And many of you may be wondering to yourselves, how is it that the wyverns seem to just magically materialize out of thin air wherever our characters go? And need I remind you that the Venom can actually sense each other's presence, and Zayden is also a Venom, so it's safe to say that he is at fault for whenever the Venom attack because they can all sense him and where he is at all times. He is literally a liability to the wing, and he should not be on the task force. He is just a walking time bomb waiting to go off. I love how Aura is the one who really messes up here, and she's the one who hates the flyers because she thinks that they're inadequate and not as resilient as the dragon flyers, and yet she's the one who burns an entire town down and almost kills everyone there. I just found that to be incredibly ironic. Personally, if I was there, I would have Spartan kicked her off the tower, but not to worry because the wyverns swoop in and they get rid of her so Violet doesn't have to get her hands dirty. We got another Dragon Uber moment with Terran letting them know that his ETA is 60 seconds away, and then Violet tells him to take us both. And then Terran fires back, I am not a horse, because he doesn't want to carry Zayden, which makes absolutely no sense because Zayden is his mate's rider, and if Zayden dies, then Violet dies, and then you would be upset because now your mate is mentally depressed and your rider is also dead, and then now you're depressed. Why would you put yourself in jeopardy like this? It makes no sense that Terran is so upset at Zayden. It really does not. But luckily for us, we do get another on our bingo card. And would you look at that? We got our first bingo of the video. We actually got 2. So if you guys would like to participate, feel free to grab your drink of choice and take a couple sips in celebration of the complete and utter tomfoolery that is the Onyx Storm series. And I suppose we're getting about halfway through the video, and I just want to check in with you guys and say thank you so much to those of you who have made it this far. I really appreciate you guys. Make sure to leave a dragon comment down below, and don't forget to answer the question of this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. And back to the book. Violet says something so out of left field that it's actually confusing to me how she could even utter these very words in this sequence. So they're trying to get up to Terran, and as they're trying to mount Terran, the wyvern is swooping in to attack them, and Zayden is picked up by Terran, whose claws hook over Zayden's shoulders and yanks them into the night. And then Violet sees the wyvern coming in on the right, and then she turns to Zayden and she says, "You better be damn good with these shadows." Ma'am, we just witnessed him take out your entire class by himself. What do you mean he better be good with these shadows? You know that he is. Why would you say that? It makes absolutely no sense because either Violet is completely blind or she doesn't trust Zayden to actually do his job. And here she doesn't use the term blocking in the way that I initially intended for this bingo card, but I'm still going to count it. Oh, this part is crazy because Rebecca Yarros wants us to suspend our disbelief so much in this scene, and I just can't wrap my head around how this is physically possible for Violet, the woman who dislocated her knee when she jumped off the parapet. How is she able to perform this feat here? She's hanging on to Zayden like a drowning cat as Terran is picking him up by his shoulders and pulling them through the air. It doesn't make any sense at all. So Zayden pivots with alarming speed, putting himself in front of me, then hauls me up against his chest, bringing our heads level. Hold on. So they're holding on to each other like this. And then Taryn picks Xaden up by his shoulders. But if I'm like this with Xaden and Violet, how is this working? I don't understand it. I cannot even picture it in my head how this is physically possible because Taryn is holding on to Xaden, who's holding on to Violet, and Violet's holding on to Xaden. How is he able to aim his shadows if they're holding on to each other for dear life? I'm sorry, that does not sound plausible to me. I know it's silly to say that in the realm of fantasy, but why couldn't Xaden just grab her with his shadows and carry her, or get it so they could actually be riding on Taryn? None of this makes any sense. And then they ride off into safety, and right as they get home, they find that there is this letter right next to the gem with the name Lightning Wielder written on the envelope, so it's addressed to Violet, and it says, Violet, just a reminder that while I want you to come of your own free will, I'm capable of taking you whenever I wish. And why don't you? Just ease my suffering. Take her now. I really don't care. Just end this thing. I don't know why you're prolonging this, Theophany, because you're supposed to be smart, and yet you're willing to sacrifice your own venom men and women when you could just end this right now. And Theophany does allude to the fact that she has the answers that Violet seeks, and he knows that she's looking for Andarna's people and a cure to the venom, proving that once again the venom are far superior because they are far more intelligent than Violet and all of her friends combined. And now we're on to chapter 20, where Violet goes through and tells us over the past couple of days she has been researching, interrogating Jack to no avail, and then she has to present her findings to the council. And Riddick, for some reason, feels incredibly defensive of Violet and wants to protect her, even though she's the strongest person here. Why does she need protection? Not to mention that everyone is on Team Violet, so no one would let anything happen to her. I don't know, I just felt like he had a lot of misplaced protective older brother energy just surge out of nowhere. So Violet doesn't want him to be in the council with her because I guess no one wants her friends in there. And then Riddick tells her, I just need to go. And then Riddick goes into an entire recap of every time that Violet struck out on her own, something terrible happened, which I will give Riddick credit where credit is due. He is correct.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
Trouble follows Violet like a magnet. She cannot escape it. It is just her destiny to constantly get in trouble all the time. And then Riddick actually reveals that he has been honing his ice-wielding abilities. I'm just as good a fighter as any of you, and while you've been focused on rehab, referring to Sawyer like he has a choice, he doesn't have a leg. Riddick needs to learn how to walk with only one leg. What are you talking about? And Rhiannon is chasing first years to keep them in line. I've been the one reading every book Justinia shoves at me and spending extra hours training. Then he says, it really pisses me off when you guys act like my sense of humor somehow lessens my ability to show up for our squad. If you don't want to get treated like the class clown, stop acting like the class clown, because no one's going to respect you otherwise. And then he shows off his new ability of being able to freeze fruit. So useful in the war effort. Thanks, Riddick. So I guess Riddick has finally learned how to hone his powers, and he's not going to accidentally freeze doors shut anymore. Fingers crossed. And then as she goes into the council meeting, she notices that Kat is flirting with another flyer who turns out to be her cousin. But because Violet is so self-absorbed, she hasn't even bothered to meet all the Griffin flyers yet, so she doesn't know who this guy is. And then she gets upset because she actually wanted Kat and Traeger to get together. She shipped them. Violet does not approve of this new match. Violet needs to insert herself into every situation, not unlike Xaden, and she wants everything to go her way perfectly, and if it doesn't, she gets upset. Even in regards to her boyfriend's ex's love life. It astounds me how much this woman is obsessed with her boyfriend's ex. Kat lives rent-free in Violet's mind, and I just wish that Violet would leave her alone. Kat isn't a threat at all because Xaden does not love her, and she hasn't acted out on her feelings with Xaden for quite some time now. So I think we should all just move on. That love triangle was so stupid. And thankfully, because now her ex-boyfriend, who is the prince, is on the council, she's able to leverage a little bit more with the negotiations. So now the odds are in her favor. Now, in the meeting, it is revealed that they have new intentions with the task force to actually go to Orisha, which is Xaden's hometown. And now Markham, Grin, and Atos are all butting heads with Violet because, of course, they're the bad guys and Violet is a good guy, and therefore we have to be on her side. Because everyone else besides Violet is wrong at all times, and the only time they are right is when it directly benefits Violet and helps her solve the riddle. And Xaden is super impressed that Violet is standing up to these obnoxious jerks, and then Halden steps in to calm them down. We'll give this one shot. Name your squad for the Deverelli mission, Cadet Sorengale, Halden says, but know that if you fail, we'll assign another commander, and refusing to continue will negate the terms of the Second Orisha Accord, talking about the peace treaty between them and Navarre. And Violet doesn't want that to happen because then Xaden will lose his title of the Duke of Tyrandor, therefore robbing her of her ability to become the Duchess and potentially the Queen of Orisha. God, this woman is so selfish. And I love how immediately she thinks about the fact that her boyfriend will not be a duke anymore, instead of the fact that hundreds and thousands of people's lives hang in the balance. It makes it really hard to root for them because none of these people are really here for the greater good, they're just here for themselves. And then they also start to question Xaden's authority there because his father used to lead the rebellion against the Navarians. And Halden, of course, does not want him to go there because he wants Violet all to himself. He and Xaden start to clash a little bit. So Xaden tells them he's going on the task force with Violet. And then Halden says, if I give my permission, I don't know why Halden wouldn't know about the mating situation between Xaden and Violet's dragons, because if he knew that they couldn't stay apart without them being in pain, I don't think he would make that decision, even if it meant that he would have to be around Xaden. Because Xaden is still technically Violet's professor, so he cannot act on their relationship with her. So they're still technically separated, so he does have a bit of leverage against him. Again, people in these books are making terrible decisions that affect the people that they supposedly love, and we're just expected to just ignore them. Xaden, of course, fires back. I asked permission of one person on the continent, and as sure as Amari isn't you, referring to the fact that he only follows the king's orders and not the prince. And then Halden says, I speak in my father's stead. Exactly, that's the whole reason why he's here. He is a placeholder for the king. I don't know why Xaden just ignores that. Then he turns to Violet and says, when would you like to go? Violet, because now she's taken the reins of the task force, she says, we fly for Deverelli as soon as His Highness is ready, referring to Halden. And then Halden says, we depart the day after tomorrow. So now the task force is finally underway, but before they can actually go, they do have to actually go to Orisha first, where they will meet up with Karis, the man who gave Violet research tomes earlier. And another reason why Halden didn't want him to go, another excuse as to why the council doesn't want Xaden to go with them, is because he's a teacher. And Xaden argues back that he has an assistant that could take up his mantle and teach his students instead. I'm like, what were you teaching them? And how is that efficient? It's not like your teacher's assistant has the same exact signet as you. You're teaching your students how to fight you. So if you leave, they're not learning the same lesson. You cannot just leave and expect it to be the same. Did you give your assistant your lesson plans? Are there any activities that you're going to do? What have you actually taught your students other than the fact that you're a badass who can kick all of their asses if push came to shove? These people have learned absolutely nothing, and it bothers me as a former teacher to watch this happen. And of course, much to Xaden's chagrin, Dane is also coming because he speaks the language that they're going to need in order to talk to the Deverelli people. Yaros is doing absolutely everything to keep this poor guy in the narrative. And then Mira, for some reason, hates Kat's cousin because he did something that put Violet's life on the line. Why does everyone need to defend Violet when Yaros keeps trying to tell us that she's the strongest person? Xaden doesn't control her, she doesn't need anyone's help, but then everyone rallies around her and defends her anyway. If she's this amazing, tough badass, she can speak for herself. She can command a room. No one needs to fight on her behalf. We just saw her make negotiations with people because her ex-boyfriend, who's still in love with her, is on the council, but we're just going to ignore that for now. But she can't even fight her own battles. How are we supposed to root for her as a character? She has no autonomy over any part of her story at all. Everyone does all the dirty work for her, and she is a passive character in her own story, and it is so irritating. All of this praise that Violet gets is completely unearned. So chapter 21, they have this gemstone that they need to trade with the Deverelli, and they are going to Karis' house, and they are taking Halden with them. I want you to pay attention to this because the way that it is described is so funny. Halden is traveling in a basket of sorts, and this basket is being carried by the Griffins, who we all know are inferior flyers to the dragons, and yet they're saddling them with 2 extra riders to keep track of. The Griffins cannot keep up, Tyrion warns me as we descend toward Dakaris' palace, especially when carrying the bulk of 2 humans. So why don't you help them? Like, the audacity of this dragon who knows that the Griffins are slower than them, they have less endurance when it comes to flying and in the weather, and yet they are putting even more responsibility onto them to carry Halden. Why wouldn't the dragons be carrying him? And also, if Halden was at Basgiath War College, why is he being carried in a basket instead of riding his dragon? Where is his dragon? I feel like this is a major hole in logic when it comes to his character, because Halden and Violet met at Basgiath War College where she was a scribe, or he was going through a conscription day, meaning that he either had a dragon or is rejected and then sent home. So Halden is being carried in a basket by the Griffins, who are inferior flyers, and then Tyrion is complaining about the fact that they are slowing down. Tyrion, if you're gonna complain about it, why don't you go help them? These people are deliberately making their lives more difficult, and it's hard for me to even sympathize with them at all. And then Violet calls him out on this. Even she is saying that Tyrion is being selfish, and she asks, are you offering to carry one of them? And then he says, I'm suggesting we continue onward with only riders and flyers. And then Rebecca Yarros finally remembered that Violet has a disability. She finally focuses on how fatigued Violet is, and now the journey is starting to take its toll on her body. I undo my strap on her saddle, then beg my body to comply as I climb out of the seat. Muscles, tendons, ligaments, they all creak and pop as I dismount. My knees nearly buckle when I hit the ground. So she is obviously physically spent, and throughout the rest of this chapter, everyone bends over backwards to try to cater to Violet. And then Violet is resentful of other people who do not have her disability and takes out her frustration on Kat. Of course, this is always the first target that Violet naturally gravitates to. I can't help but shoot a glare at Kat as she springs up the stairs to meet the 2 waiting flyer guards like she hasn't been airborne 24 hours straight. I'm sorry, do you want people to cosplay for you to make you feel better about yourself, the fact that you have a disability? I don't know, this statement rubbed me the wrong way. Violet hates Kat even though she pretends like she doesn't, so much that she is resentful of the fact that Kat is not disabled like she is. When I get flare-ups, or when I sit in a position for too long, my body really does start screaming at me. But it gets so bad to the point where I can't even sit in a position for too long, or else my body starts to hurt. So I have to be constantly moving, which is a nightmare if you think about it. I understand Violet's frustration at her body when she gets off her dragon after a 24-hour straight flight, which I'm not sure how she was able to manage that. 24-hour straight flights, like you didn't even stop to go to the bathroom, you didn't stop to eat or do anything. Anyway, but that doesn't give you the right to punish other people for not having your disability. Also, why are we so hyper-focused on Kat? Leave this poor woman alone. But I just think that this statement is really emblematic of who Violet is as a character, that she is throwing a fit that other people aren't also struggling or in as much pain as Violet is. She always feels a need to punish Kat for existing. And if she doesn't like her, why did you ask her to be on this task force? In the last episode that we did on Onyx Storm, Violet actually wanted Kat to be in this task force with her as one of the representatives of the Griffin Flyers. And then within the first 24 hours of their task force, she's already upset that Kat is there. Then why did you invite her? Kat's character in this series is honestly just a punching bag for Violet, and she really serves no other purpose other than to be the crazy, jealous ex-girlfriend that Violet is constantly butting heads with. And these kind of characters are not very conducive to the feminist agenda. We're not very teen girl in this series, I'll tell you that much. So Violet is struggle busting her way through the castle, climbing up these stairs. She's exhausted, she's super tired, but no one is struggling as much as Halden. I pause as Halden climbs awkwardly out of the 4-foot-tall basket Kira deposited in front of us. Xaden approaches her and asks her how she's feeling, and then she turns and looks at Halden, and she's like, you know what, never mind, I'm not struggling as much as this guy. I don't know why. So they meet up with Dakaris, and it's very obvious that Violet is not in the mood because she's swaying on her feet, she's about to pass out, and as they are talking to Dakaris, Halden feels the need to swoop in next to Violet and put her hand up against the small of her back, and then Xaden, of course, was very upset at this. So Halden, his hand, rises to the small of my back and I stiffen, and then shadows rise up the back of my thigh, curling around my hip, and I sidestep towards Xaden, effectively losing Halden's hand in the process. And it's this kind of body language that I wish we teach in schools when it comes to the concept of consent is a woman doesn't need to verbally say no to let you know that what you're doing is weird and gross and creepy and you need to stop. If a woman is very obviously keeping space between you, if her body's taking a more defensive pose, that is not an invitation for you to try to change her mind. That is not a challenge. That is her telling you in the most polite way possible without even uttering a word, do not touch me. And Violet has been giving Halden all the signs, verbally, physically, telling him that she is just not interested and he is not listening. And this character is really getting on my nerves, not only because he's such a slimy, gross guy, but also because he is just there to make Xaden look better by comparison. And he is the embodiment of character assassination, same with Kat. They are both here to serve a purpose to make the other characters look better, but it actually makes it worse because it's a cheap trick. And a lot of people can feel that subconsciously that the author is trying to pull a fast one on us and is trying to pull this chicanery where we start to root for the main characters now because, oh, they're not as bad. Like it's a competition. It's not a competition. Just make likable characters and that way you won't have this problem. So Violet is really tired and she's slouching. She can't make her way up the stairs on her own without someone needing to help her. And this part is interesting because I guess the mental group chat that she has in her mind between her, Taryn, and Xaden, it's not like a Zoom meeting call where everyone is in the meeting and they're all listening and they know what each other are saying, but it's actually a one-way phone call between them. And then she tries to talk to Taryn and she accidentally talks to Xaden instead. Will you still keep me if I have to crawl up the stairs? I asked Taryn. And then Xaden answers her, you're not crawling. So I don't know if that was mentioned in the other books. It's more like a one-way call between them. Because in the first book, you may remember, they can only hear each other's thoughts one-on-one. I don't understand any of this lore, how it works, because it feels like the rules are constantly changing just for the convenience of the plot. And then Xaden decides to finish the conversation by taking Violet up to her room. Actually, their room, because space is limited for these people, even though there's only, 10 of them? And you're telling me this palace cannot accommodate 10 extra guests? How many people are living in this palace? How many kids do you have? I guess it must be a small place. And because Rebecca Yarros is a lazy writer, she feels the need to introduce this super convenient plot device where she forces our characters together unnaturally because she's written herself in a narrative corner. She doesn't know how to get out of it without introducing some tropes like the one bed trope, the forced proximity trope, all rolled up into one. So as Xaden and Violet are getting hot and heavy, they are interrupted by Takaris. And Xaden, of course, is very upset at this, and because he has a huge chip on his shoulder, he decides to order the Viscount around in his own house. The Viscount's knowing gaze jumps between Xaden and me, but he doesn't bother with pithy commentary. Make it quick, Xaden orders without explanation. The prince cannot arrive basket, Takaris says. Again, why is Takaris the only rational person? He's literally on this page for 2 minutes, and already he's making better decisions than everyone else. Again, it doesn't make any sense why Halden is not riding on a dragon. They are intentionally trying to humiliate him. They cannot risk losing him as an ally. He is a very powerful piece in this puzzle. He is literally holding all of their lives in his hands. If they do anything against him, it could count as treason. But I guess tarnishing his reputation is not against Vivarian rules, which is interesting. So Takaris gives him a little lesson on decorum. It is unseemly for royalty, and in a culture that values rare items, shrewd trades, and luxury, he'll never be granted an audience if he is seen as the item that is delivered. Why did they not think of this? These people are supposedly the best and brightest, and they are making imprudent decisions that could negatively affect their entire quest. One mistake and this is all over, and everyone's gonna fall to the venom. Why are you putting this man in a basket? Your own pettiness does not justify why you treat him this way. Even if he wasn't the prince, just having someone being carried in a basket is pretty demoralizing, I would say, unless it was a hot air balloon. Then that's perfectly fine. And apparently Takaris is joining them on this quest, and he says that Halden can actually take a ship to their next stop. It's a 2-day journey by my fastest ship, which would make, what, a 12-hour flight due south? And then Takaris says, I'll leave within the hour with the prince. It appears he may need the rest. I guess Halden doesn't need rest, but okay. And then Xaden decides to intercept and speak on Violet's behalf before she even has the chance to respond to Takaris' very polite gesture. This man is a very good host, and Xaden is just trampling on that. She's fine, Xaden interrupts. I'm the one feeling a little clingy. Dakaris turns to Violet because Xaden is a ticking time bomb about to go off, and he asks her, tell me you'll help control him. And then Violet lifts her chin. What makes you think he's the one you'd have to worry about? He is, Violet. He's a Venin. Dakaris does have to worry about him. Why are you so stupid? And then Dakaris inquires about the token or the artifact that they're going to trade with the Devreli people, and Violet says that Halden's carrying it. He'll be taking the audience. So Halden, who is basically the spokesperson, the representative of the task force, is going to go ahead and try to reason with them before the dragons come. These people don't like dragons. They are dragon haters. And I guess he's trying to butter these people up before the dragons swoop in. And then the scene ends with the warning that King Cortland also likes to collect rarities like Violet. And he says, do not make a deal you cannot keep. Which, as we all know, the one thing Violet is best at is whenever she receives a warning, she's very quick to steamroll right over it and get herself in trouble, regardless of the stakes. So after 20 hours of being beyond the wards, Violet has a bit of empathy towards Jack Barlow. Nearly 24 hours later, my access to magic fades to all but a trickle. The loss is stunning, immeasurable in a way that for an instant makes me pity Jack Barlow. I wish we could have explored that way more, but because Jack Barlow is a cartoonish villain and a two-dimensional character at that, he doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Realizes that she and Taryn are still able to communicate. Of course, because Violet is the main character, she's super special, and she still has to be given a slight advantage over everyone. I reach for the glittering onyx bond, so using the term onyx once again, second time in the past 50 pages. But even though Taryn is still there, Xaden isn't. We're already cut off. Same thing applies to all of the other dragon riders and griffin flyers that can't connect with their dragons and their griffins. They can't access their magic, so everyone's starting to freak out. And that takes us to chapter 22. And this is when they finally arrive at their destination at Devreli, and Violet is describing it as this beautiful place with blue waters and white sands, and then she sees something sinister. A quarter of the way up the first hill, armed with a dozen of the largest crossbows I've ever seen, all loaded with the shining metallic tips. These are very reminiscent of the dragon killers that you see in season 8 of Game of Thrones. I do also want to turn your attention to the fact that Taryn is pointing with his nose at something, and he was also able to hook and darn it into her that attaches her to Taryn, so if something were to happen to her, she'd be attached to him so she wouldn't fall. And he was able to click her harness in using his teeth, and I don't know the exact logistics of that, but I find that to be a bit unrealistic. I don't think a creature who doesn't have any opposable thumbs can actually do that, but what do I know? So I talked about before how Rebecca Yarros's world building was a little bit weak. She has normal names for animals like goats and sheep. She doesn't call them anything different, but for some reason she feels the need to call dolphins something different. So a group of creatures starts beneath us in the water, jumping up into the air in a series of graceful leaps that almost make up for the flurry of people yelling and running back into their homes as we fly over. I wonder what they taste. And Darna starts, no, my protest catches me by surprise. They're dolphinum, and they're just too pretty to be your snack. I don't understand why we're calling dolphins by their scientific name rather than just saying dolphins when you already call goat and sheep by their common name. I really wish that Rebecca Yarros put this book through a couple more rounds of edits just so people can catch these fastidious little details, because if she's overlooking little things like this, what else is she forgetting? And also she says aqua waters instead of aquamarine, so you're describing the water as having a watery color. Just say aquamarine or turquoise. So they are flying to Dakaris's manor, so I guess this guy has multiple estates just scattered all around the continent. So as they're flying to his manor, everyone in the village is freaking out about the dragons. They're running, they're screaming, they're hiding from them. And as everyone's landing, the riders are having a very difficult time not communicating with their dragons, especially Riddick, which doesn't surprise me at all. So Atrom is his dragon, and he's trying to talk to Riddick, and I will say this is actually one of the funnier scenes of the entire book. I will give Rebecca Yarros that. She does have these little bits of humor throughout the book, and I just wish it was more consistent, especially with the character of Riddick, because he tries so hard to be the funny guy, but the only time when he is funny is when he is suffering in a very slapstick humor kind of way. So this is when he's trying to communicate to Riddick, and it's just not happening. I don't know what you're saying, Riddick turns towards Atrom. The brown swordtail opens his mouth and roars louder, blowing back Riddick's dark brown hair and covering my friend, thank you for reminding us that he's your friend, in a layer of goopy saliva. Gross. Riddick slowly lifts his hands and scrapes the slime off his face. Yelling at me doesn't help. It's like shouting in a language I don't speak. Thank you, Captain Obvious. So I thought that was funny. A bit juvenile for a book written for grown women, but whatever, we'll take what we can get. And then Violet finally makes a connection after 24 hours of apparently not talking to anyone, that she, Taryn, and Darna are the only people that can still communicate. I think we're the only ones who can speak to each other. My feet sink into the sand and then Violet, true to form because she cannot keep a secret to save her life, she immediately spills the beans to her sister. I can still speak to Taryn, and Mira, unlike Violet, starts to question why this is. Do you think it's because you're bonded to two, or is it Darna? I shake my head, my focus straying to Zayden's back. I don't know. The thing that bugs me the most about Violet is that for someone who's very intelligent, she's not very curious about the world, and I think a big reason why people who are intelligent are the way they are is not just because it comes to them naturally, but because they ask the questions and try to seek answers, like the scientific method. You have an idea in your head, you gather the evidence, you do the research to figure out why this is the way it is, and then you come to a conclusion. Violet never attributes that to her life. She just expects everything to be handed to her on a silver platter, so she doesn't have to do any of the work, and that's why she is not as intelligent or clever as Rebecca Yarros likes to think that she is, because when all the answers are given to you, you're not taught how to find those answers by yourself. You aren't given the proper tools or critical thinking skills to work through a problem on your own when other people in your life help you. But it's also because Rebecca Yarros never wants to see Violet be wrong. I don't know why they don't have any other measures to communicate with their dragons. You're telling me that these people never once prepared for the day that they may not be able to communicate with their dragons? You don't think that's a better use of time or resources rather than physics? When do these people use physics? They never do. When did they ever talk about history? They never do. All these classes at this college are a waste of time. And then she goes up to Zayden and they decide to make plans to go see a merchant at this market in town. And this is also when we see a little bit of Zayden's venomous come out. Everyone is heading up to take naps before we ride out to find the merchant. Halden is set to meet the king at 3, so we can get a good 4 hours of sleep in if you want. I'm going to stay out here for a little bit. You go. So this is Zayden talking to Violet to go get some rest. And then Violet comments on the fact that Takaris gave them the same room again, and Zayden says, because he values his life. Zayden, stop threatening to kill people. Atos and Markham no longer care about the fact that Violet and Zayden are sneaking around and hanging out, even though it's against rules that he's a professor and she's a student. I guess we just completely forgot about that plot line. God, what a waste of time. And then Violet offers to stay out with him, but Zayden actually wants some alone time. It's hard to explain, but I'm just going to take a little time to myself to soak in this view. And then he says, can you feel it? So he grabs my hand and brings it to his chest, where his heart pounds in a steady rhythm that feels slightly more relaxed than it was in Corden. Than it has been in weeks, really. Can you feel it? It's slower, I whisper. There's no magic here, he tugs me against him. No power, no lure. No taunting reminder that I can save everyone if I just reach for it and take what's offered, it's only peace. So this excerpt finally has some useful information about the culture of Defrelli and how cutthroat it is, literally. There is a saying in Defrelli, the word is blood. When they make a trade, broker a deal, it is considered law. I cannot help but wonder what part of the Croveland rebels did not uphold. So there is some mystery regarding the rebels and why they didn't make it past Devrelli, I suppose, in the last war. And Violet's father is trying to think of what the Ish did that angered the Devrelli. So it's very clear that if they ever make a promise to anyone, they have to keep it, or else it means their heads. So because everyone is scared of dragons, our dragon riders are now forced to ride horses, which apparently was also not something that they were trained on, because Riddick doesn't like horses for this very reason. Hey, horses bite. And dragons don't? My gosh, I hate this character. And Drake, who is Pat's cousin, calls back, and dragons do what exactly? Thank you, Drake. Thank you. Why is it everyone else besides the Navarian dragon riders are intelligent human beings with a shred of common sense? Then Mira is upset at him because she's just angry at everyone. That's Mira's entire personality trait this entire book. She's just mad at everyone and protective of Violet. That's it. So they're riding on the horses, and Riddick feels more secure riding a horse than he does riding his dragon. Yeah, Riddick, it's called a saddle. Maybe you should ask Violet why she's the only one that has one and the rest of you don't. Just food for thought. Violet thinks something to herself that I think is a glaring red flag, because everyone is shocked at the fact that Zayden is actually smiling. Zayden scoffs and the smirk transforms into a smile as we pass under a patch of dappled sunlight. I stare at him like it's first year all over again. Zayden Ryerson is a lot of things, but happy isn't usually one of them. Wow, so he's just an energy vampire all the time, isn't he? Sounds like a great guy to spend the rest of your life with, eh, ladies? If that is your persuasion. Or gentlemen. And then as they're riding the horses, some people are really struggling with it, but Violet, of course, because she's practically perfect in every way, is doing just fine because she's actually ridden horses before. She's always been a good rider. Dane argues on my behalf because apparently she's slipping because she's tired from the past couple of days of traveling. And then Zayden asks, did you two ride a lot when you were younger? Don't answer that. That's a trap. Everyone is on the edge of their seats, and Zayden asks, am I not allowed to ask about your childhood? No, I blurt out, of course you are. And then Dane interjects, it's just that you usually act like I didn't grow up with her, like we weren't best friends. And then everyone is confused about why Zayden is acting so differently. And then he rides off with Dane to talk to the merchant. And as he leaves, he offers me another precious grin. He disappears into the store, followed quickly by Dane. And then Drake and Kat are talking amongst themselves. Is that the same guy? Drake asks Kat, turning around the saddle. They cannot possibly be the same fucking guy. Kat is upset that she never got the special treatment. I try not to look but fail, and when I glance over my shoulder, I catch a glimpse of her shrugging and quickly looking away. So also pay attention to this verbiage because this made me mad. Because Riddick is tapping a little bit into his gaslight gatekeep girl boss era here, and I'll explain why in a minute. Maybe this is who he could have been if his dad hadn't led a whole rebellion and fucked him over by getting executed. Executed by who? Riddick. Who killed him? Who was it? Again? Oh right, General Sorrengail, Violet's mother, killed him. What do you mean getting executed? Notice how his sentence is phrased so it's in the passive voice, meaning that things are happening to his father almost like it's his fault, and putting the onus on Zayden's father for leading a rebellion against a corrupt government and then dying as a result of leading that rebellion, which makes me realize that Rebecca Yarros is never going to hold these people accountable for all of their shitty decisions and all of that, oh my gosh, our government is secretly bad and corrupt. That was all bullshit, just to add some extra seasoning to her very vanilla book in order to make it more interesting and pretend like she was actually going to delve into these issues. But because she, like many of us here in America, is so heavily indoctrinated by this romanticization of our military, by this imperialistic perspective that we have of our own country, we're very egotistical. And I think when Rebecca was writing the story, she was making a lot of subconscious connections to America, and a lot of her critiques about it were very surface level. And the minute she had to get 2 inches below the surface, she just hit rock bottom, because that would require her to unlearn things, educate herself on our own country and its misgivings and its many, many, many flaws, and she just doesn't have the mental capacity to do that, or the motivation. And I find this to be a particularly interesting perspective to have on a man and how he treats a woman, whether or not she is deemed his soulmate. Or it could just be that he loves Violet, so he's not a dick to her. So the only reason why he's nice to Violet is because they're sleeping together. I'm sorry, but that does not give you an excuse to treat other people like crap. That is, again, a red flag. So they are in the market. People are starting to notice they're locals, and they start harassing them. And one of them calls them slur firebringers. Really, that's the best you can do. And because these people cannot go 2 minutes without causing drama, they start a fight with the people in the merchant shop. And then, of course, they win the battle because they are the good guys. So Zane tries to be a badass when he pulls his own knife out from his latest victim. This is going to hurt, Zayden warns, for retrieving my dagger from his shoulder. To his credit, the man doesn't scream or complain when Zayden wipes the blade clean on the back of his white tunic. You really shouldn't raise a blade if you're not prepared to receive one. And then Mira gets upset about the fact that they were being racially profiled. That was annoying. Are you protecting something, or you just really hate writers? I guess we're just completely ignoring the fact that you basically picked a fight with the Griffin Flyers for years, all because of racism, but we're just gonna ignore that. It's not fun when you're the one on the receiving end of racism, is it, Mira? At least Firebringers is better than the Dark One, so this quest is already going super well. Then, once the fight finally dies down, and everyone is, for the most part, okay, with just a few bumps and scratches, they find out that the people that were attacking them were actually protecting their mother named Narelle. And then, of course, because Violet has to be the good one of all of them, she is the one who declares peace and assures them that they're going to be just fine. They're not here to hurt them, they're just here looking for a book. We're not here to kill anyone, I tell the shopkeeper as her mother walks into the light, leaning heavily on a walking cane. Her hair is silver, and the lines in her face have deepened with time, but she has the same pert nose as her daughter, the same brown eyes and round face. you're Narelle. And then Narelle says this and stops Violet in her tracks. And you must be Asher Sorrengail's daughter, here to collect the books he wrote for you. So they were going to this market to retrieve her father's books that he gave to the merchant Narelle that he mentioned in the letters, which is why Violet wanted to come here. And Violet didn't know that she actually had these books. So this is again another surprise that her father has left. Feels like he's taking her on the scavenger hunt, and each new place she finds a brand new clue. And that brings us to chapter 24. You guys, were almost done. Hang tight. So again, this is one of the only excerpts that is actually useful because it is on the same track or trajectory as the story, but it's still rather vague. She won't understand why you've kept her in the dark. You left too soon, left too many of your plans unfinished. Now we can only hope the bond between our daughters is strong enough to endure the path they've chosen. They'll need each other to survive. Which is strange because we rarely see Mira and Violet interact, and Lilith is acting like their sisterhood is like the Elsa and Anna of Frozen, like they're going to save the world with their love for each other, but we hardly ever see them together throughout this entire story. So I don't really buy that whole sisterly bond thing because that just isn't evident in these pages. Violet is way more focused on Xaden than she is on Mira. And because we don't have enough awful comic relief in this story with Riddick, the grandmother decides to be a horny grandmother. Thank you, young man, she says to Xaden, then gives him a second look before glancing at Dane. My, some fine looking men. I don't know why I gave her a southern accent. I just thought that was very appropriate with the tone I was getting here, because anyone who says my must be from the south. So her daughter chastises Narelle for being a horny grandma, and Narelle answers, I'm 93, Leona, I'm not dead. Or what is it you Amarali say? I have not yet met Malik. He's your god of death, is he not? So I do like that distinction that these people do not worship the same gods as the Navarians. I think that's a very good attention to detail there by Yaros. But this is when we learn the continent's true names. One of the many critiques that Rebecca Yarros has in regards to her world building was the fact that she never actually named the continent. She just calls it the continent, which again is a very vague and lazy name to give to a country. And now she's finally giving it a title. The continent was named Amaris after the goddess of luck, the one that Violet worships. And this is why it confuses me that these people did not know the name of their continent before, because this is a very nationalistic country. These people have a lot of pride for who they are and their identity, and it doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't just name it. Like, this country likes to stake claim on bodies of water, and other countries calling them the 51st state of America, calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And this country, which is very reminiscent of America, it doesn't seem very realistic that they wouldn't just call their country whatever they wanted. They wouldn't just name it like the United States of Navarre or something. That feels like a massive oversight and plot hole for them. And it's just very funny to me that these people just magically remembered that out of nowhere. It would have made more sense if they were like all under this spell or they couldn't remember the name of their country, which would also make sense with the mage lights, right? Because that's old magic left over from best guy. So it would make sense if someone like cast a spell over them on accident and made it so they couldn't remember what their country's name was. But I guess they all just collectively forgot at the same time. No rhyme or reason to it. They just did. And they never bothered to rename it because I guess the continent is just easier to remember. I don't know. I'm over it. We have one chapter left before this video is over. I'm just trying to power through this. So the one interesting thing about the Devreli people is that they're actually atheists. So they don't worship any religion. They worship science, which is cool. I like that. It's why we're considered the most neutral of the Isles. Perfect for trade. What you call gods, we call science. What you call fate, we call coincidence. What you call a divine intervention of love, we call alchemy. Two substances combined to make something entirely new, not unlike what's between the two of you. And she references Violet and Xaden, of course, because their love is so perfect. It's radiating out from the two of them. It's so obvious how much in love they are that complete strangers can see it from a mile away. And then even Narelle calls Xaden out for being a toxic romantic. I heard you saying you'd kill my grandson if he took another step toward your beloved young man. How illogically, toxically romantic of you. What a millennial thing to say. That kind of dialogue just makes me cringe so hard. But Asher actually predicted that her and Dane would get together, like he shipped them, I guess. Have to admit, this kind of confident violence isn't what I pictured when Asher talked about you. He predicted you two would eventually be for each other. He described you almost perfectly, Dane Atos. Still trying really hard to force his love triangle between them, but it's not working. And Xaden, of course, feels the need to lash out at Dane, even though he was not the one that brought up this conversation. Everyone assumes she'll wind up with you, but it's my last name she ends up wearing on her flight jacket in formation. It's like a Letterman jacket thing. Do these people actually wear their last names on the back of their jackets? Oh my gosh, that would look so corny. I hate that. And also this dick measuring contest between them is getting really old. Please stop. We all know that Dane is not going to get together with Violet. Stop beating this dead horse and just let it lie. Narelle is surprised that Asher, who is so smart, he did not predict the fact that Xaden and Violet would have gotten together. Asher certainly didn't predict that. He would have if I've ever met him. How did you not meet each other? Because you were at the same college for years. It doesn't make any sense. And then Mira feels the need to rationalize their love as a super healthy and amazing thing, even though it's not. Our mother knew, Mira says, taking her place at the end of the bookshelf. She wasn't enthusiastic about it or anything, but she knew love when she saw it, as if their love is this pure, amazing thing. But she certainly never told us about our father coming here. Yeah, it's funny how you're mad at Brennan for keeping a secret to save your life, but you're not mad at your mother or your father for keeping this very basic secret from you. They tell her that Asher died and Narelle is very upset. Your father risked all your lives to hide away his life's work with the sole purpose that you find it, Violet. What a considerate dad, putting his entire family in harm's way, all in the name of research. He left the last of it with me almost 4 years ago with explicit instructions that you only be given if you had attained this intelligence and understanding that you would need to comprehend it. And then she says, he told me to bring you the rarest item I possess. And then apparently the best treasure that she has is her mind, which is a terrible trade. The books are only for you, Narelle confirms. I have 3 simple questions, and if you're capable of answering them, the book is yours. Despite the fact that Violet talks big game and she says that her greatest treasure is her mind, she still needs Dane's help to solve these riddles. So one of the questions is, he left a manuscript for you. What is the title? The answer is Subjugated, the Second Uprising of the Croveland People. And the next question is a follow-up question to that one. In chapter 14, your father alludes to the Croveland Uprising falling apart, does not go into specifics. So tell me, what's your hypothesis? And she says, easy. Crova didn't keep their part of whatever deal they made with Devreli. Rather than lose a reputation, Devreli withdrew the brokerage, hence the removal of the other Isle's troops, then told the Promish king, regent, where to find the rebels. End of rebellion. And then she says, why did it fall apart? What was brokered? That's not 3 questions. That's 4. You're asking 4. These people can't count. And then Dane tries to intercept and say that's not fair, and she says she knows the answer. And Violet says, I have an idea. I just don't like being wrong. Thank you for proving what I said earlier. And she says, you're among friends. I'm sorry, you never mentioned that this was a phone a friend situation. I didn't know that going in. Why does she have this cop-out where she can ask other people? That makes no sense to me. If Violet is so clever and so smart and her greatest treasure is her mind, why does she need other minds to help her solve these riddles? And of course she turns to Dane because he speaks Crovelish and he is the one to help her. Apply your superior linguistic skills, Dane, I prompt him. Oh, he's the one with superior linguistic skills. The interrogation was recorded in the common tongue, but the raider spoke Crovelish, Dane said, and descriptors follow nouns in Crovelish. They were hunting feathertails, dragons. So Violet comes to the conclusion that the Devreli brokered a deal with Krovla, and an unnamed isle would provide the army and Krovla would provide dragons. When they were unable to do, the deal fell apart and the Midnight Massacre happened and Krovla remained part of Promio. At least we have the answer here that other countries were trying to obtain their own dragons, but it doesn't make any sense why it took them so long to do that. But whatever, none of this makes any sense. Apparently this interrogation isn't over, and this is more of a personal question that Asher did not prepare her for, because she asks her, what made you leave the prince? Because I guess Asher told her that Violet dated the prince and now she's just curious about why she broke up with him. Oh look, and Taryn once again calls Xaden the Dark One. Great, because Violet wants him to come down and set the shop on fire because she doesn't want to admit why she broke up with the prince, and then she asks him to burn it down with her inside of it because she'd rather die than answer this question alongside her friends and boyfriend. And Taryn's like, I don't think the Dark One would approve, and I'm like, why are we still calling him the Dark One, you guys? So Violet's being dramatic as usual, but then she finally concedes to the question and provides this random stranger with the answer. I left him because I found him in a delicate situation with one of his professors. And then Narelle is intrigued by this and she asks, he was having sex with the professor? And then Dane is also surprised by this, even though they were best friends, and he's like, why didn't you tell me? And she says, what are you gonna do, punch the crown prince of Navarre? That's a good point. And he cuts in and says, yes, he says still might. Don't you mean Dane still might punch him in the face? I don't understand the direction of this conversation, because it feels like Yaros wrote down that Dane was supposed to say that and she switched it to Xaden. Again, a lot of these conversations, the way that they're edited and the way they're stylized on the page, It's confusing. And also doesn't make sense with some of these character motivations. Like, why would Dane feel the need to punch this guy? I don't know. And then Norel asks another question. My God, this woman will not stop. So you left him in a jealous rage, even with the crown of Navarre in your hands, Norel prods. Did he come begging your forgiveness? Did you take him back? Violet has a bit of a meta moment when she says, I definitely can see why she owns a bookstore and which genre might be her favorite. What would be her favorite? Did romance novels even exist back then? Asking for a friend. I've never sought a crown. Oh, come on. Liar. You are such a liar. Violet, you dated the prince. The whole point of dating a prince is knowing that one day you are going to end up with a crown. If you never wanted a crown, why date a prince in the first place? And also, I know you're a liar because every time you talk about Xaden, you're always boasting about the fact that he's a brand new duke. And he is also the heir to the Retian throne, and you're telling me that you don't want a crown. You are such a dirty, rotten liar. Or she's just in denial that she is a shameless gold digger and she doesn't want to admit it to herself. I am not judging. If you are a gold digger, I'm judging her for the fact that she is trying so hard to convince herself that she is not a gold digger. Please understand, I'm not here to judge people who are gold diggers. In this economy, I totally understand it. What I'm judging her for is the fact that she's in such denial that she's trying to convince herself that she's not a gold digger when she is. You have a pattern, girly. Do not pretend like you don't. Before they part with the books, she turns to Mira and says, we all have a part to play, and what's coming for us, this one is simply hers. While he was busy raising Violet for this particular mission, your mother was raising you. I wonder what legacy you've inherited. So I do like this bit of foreshadowing of Mira's character. I just wish that she wasn't so freaking annoying this entire book that I would actually care what would happen to her, but at least they got to leave with their books. 10 minutes later, we leave the bookstore with 6 tomes written by my father, and every single one of them is passcoded. Of course they are. So the scene cuts to Violet in the bathtub, and Xaden enters the room because he has a spidey sense whenever Violet is naked and wet, apparently. And then she admires his body, and this is how she describes him: abs for days and days. If anyone ever critiques me for being too hard on these books, this is why. So she's trying to distract herself because they have this boundary where they can't do anything but kiss, and she tries to think of anything else, and she's trying to focus anywhere but on him and that incredible body he insists on walking around in. What other body would he walk around in, Violet? And Xaden's checking up on her, and because they cannot contain themselves and they're terrible at following the rules that even they put up for themselves, Xaden starts kissing her. His mouth crashes into mine, and the chapter ends, and this is where this video is also going to end. Thank you guys for being so patient and going on this journey with me through this horrible book. Just as a reminder, we had exactly 2 bingos. We almost filled out the entire card, which is crazy, but at least it smells heavenly. Honestly, it smells like beautiful, sweet little cherries. I don't know about you guys, but even though I hate on this book, I still have a lot of fun reading it and talking about it with you guys. Stay tuned for the next episode in this Onyx Storm deep dive. I wish that Rebecca Yarros would maybe pick a different editing team, but also try to experiment with her storytelling. Despite the fact that she's written 20 books before this one, it's still very clear that she has a lot to learn, and I wish that her team would do a better job of pushing her in the right direction, rather than surrounding her with a bunch of yes men whose only purpose is to just shove out these books as quickly as they can without necessarily taking the time to make this book the best it can be. It's clear that these people are more concerned with quantity versus quality, and that's why these books are losing fans, and the haters are becoming even more validated because it's clear that they're not even trying anymore. Hence why these books are so thick. I'm sorry, this book does not justify its length in the slightest. The pacing is so slow that it actually exhausts the reader more than reinvigorates them to keep going. The characters are unlikable, the world building makes absolutely no sense, and it just changes all the time because Rebecca Yarros needs to either retcon something or add something to make the world more complex and more realistic, and that's not good storytelling. And I'm hoping that since Rebecca Yarros is taking more of a personal hiatus, she's actually going to sit with her book and really marinate on it, and really to take this time to not only improve as a writer, but improve her series, because she's losing fans, she's losing readers, and she's not doing herself any good by pumping out the same crappy books again and again. She and her team have a lot of work to do, and I'm really hoping that we only have one book left in this series instead of 2. Although my conspiracy theory is that the last book is actually going to be through Xaden's point of view. I really hope that's not the case, but we'll see. Alright everyone, that was the video. Thank you so much to those of you who have stayed this long. Please let me know by leaving a dragon down in the comments. Let me know your answers to the question in the very beginning of the video. Who would you ride, marry, kill in the story? Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. And if you want to get more involved in the channel, make sure to check out my membership page so you can get really cool perks like special shoutouts at the end of my video, extra content, as well as access to all my videos one whole day early. Thanks again everyone, have a great rest of your day, and don't forget to keep reading.